Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Was an Esper? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. We begin our story in a hospital where a woman named Izuku Midoriya had just given birth to a healthy baby boy. Izuku sat up in her bed, cradling the infant in her arms, gazing into his little emerald green eyes with unconditional love. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and moments later, a man with bright green hair entered the room, accompanied by two girls. Hisashi greeted Izuku, apologizing for not being in the room with her, explaining that he couldn't leave the girls alone in the hallway. Izuku reassured him that there was no need to apologize, then turned her attention to their daughters. The eldest, 13 years old, shared her father's green hair, while the younger, 8 years old, had Izuku's dark green hair. Both girls looked at their mother with wide eyes. Izuku asked if Tatsumaki and Fubuki would like to meet their brother, and they nodded, still processing the fact that they had a new sibling. They approached their mother's bed, smiling and cooing at the infant as Izuku held him close. Izuku introduced the baby, Izuku, to his big sisters, encouraging him to say hi. The infant extended his little arms toward them, prompting Fubuki to exclaim how small and cute he was, overwhelmed with happiness and tears. Izuku, seeing her daughter's tears, couldn't help but join her in crying. Tatsumaki observed the scene with a sweat drop on her forehead, while Hisashi smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. He asked her how it felt to be a big sister to two, and Tatsumaki admitted it felt nice, though she looked away shyly. Hisashi then hugged her, teasing her about being at tsundere, which made Tatsumaki protest, insisting she wasn't one. Hisashi playfully warned her to watch her tone, causing her to apologize, which made his expression shift back to joy. He reminded them to smile because their little brother had just been born, while Izuku giggled in his mother's arms. 4 years later, Izuku was in kindergarten, growing up with a love for heroes and dreaming of becoming one. However, his classmates began to manifest their quirks, while Izuku showed no signs of having one. Concerned, the Midoriya family decided to take him to a doctor for an examination. The doctor delivered shocking news, telling Izuku that he would not develop a quirk, leaving him stunned and causing him to drop his all-might action figure. Tatsumaki, now 17, reacted with disbelief, demanding to know what the doctor meant. Hisashi reminded her to use her inside voice, while 12-year-old Fubuki insisted that it must be a mistake since the other kindergartners were showing signs of quirks. Izuku echoed her daughter's sentiment, but the doctor confirmed that after running many tests, he regrettably had to inform them that Izuku was quirkless. Tatsumaki was incredulous, asking how that could be possible. The doctor explained that being quirkless was once considered normal, but with the rise of quirks, it had become rare, with only 10% of the population being without one. Unfortunately, Izuku was among that 10%. Izuku, frozen in disbelief, struggled to accept the news. The doctor then mentioned there might be some good news, prompting Hisashi and Tatsumaki to press for details. The doctor revealed that one of the tests indicated Izuku might just be a late bloomer. Izuku and Fubuki clung to the hope that there was a chance Izuku could still develop a quirk. A decade later, 14-year-old Izuku was diligently taking notes in class when his junior high teacher gathered everyone's attention. The teacher announced that they were in their 3rd year and needed to start thinking seriously about their futures. He jokingly threw career forms into the air, knowing the students were eager to become heroes. The class erupted in excitement, showcasing their quirks, but the teacher reminded them of the school rules against quirk usage. Bakugo, a confident blonde, boasted that he was aiming for UA High School, prompting reactions from his classmates about the prestigious school and its low acceptance rate. Bakugo declared he would surpass All Might and become the #1 hero, standing on his desk with a smirk. The teacher then turned to Izuku, asking if he wanted to attend UA as well. The class fell silent, then erupted into laughter, mocking Izuku for being quirkless. Despite the ridicule, Izuku insisted that he had always dreamed of being a hero and believed he wouldn't be quirkless forever. The teacher intervened, calling for calm as the tension in the classroom rose. Bakugo was told to return to his seat before a report could be made to the principal regarding his use of his quirk. He glared at Izuku before reluctantly turning back and sitting down, with Izuku following suit. As the school day came to an end, Izuku stayed behind to take extra notes for class and work on his hero journal. Suddenly, Katsuki Bakugo snatched the journal right out of his hands. Bakugo declared that they were not finished yet, mocking Izuku for his aspirations. A bully nearby scoffed at the journal, questioning the phrase, "for my future." Izuku pleaded for Bakugo to return it, but Bakugo responded with an explosion directed at the journal, causing Izuku to cry out in disbelief as Bakugo tossed it out the window. Bakugo then placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, creating small explosions as a warning, but Izuku, feeling braver than before, clenched his fists and met Bakugo's gaze. Izuku insisted that he would not remain quirkless forever, claiming he was just a late bloomer. Bakugo laughed mockingly, suggesting that Izuku's doctor had only said that to spare his feelings. Izuku remained serious, promising that his quirk would manifest soon and that he would become a hero. Bakugo's anger flared, and after a tense moment, he dismissed Izuku with a taunt before leaving the classroom with his friends. Left alone, Izuku retrieved his hero journal and made his way home. As he walked under a bridge, he suddenly froze, sensing danger behind him. Turning around, he was confronted by a sludge villain emerging from a manhole. The villain declared that Izuku would make a perfect disguise and lunged at him. Despite Izuku's attempts to escape, he found himself trapped, struggling against the villain's grasp. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a hero emerged from the sewer, announcing his arrival with confidence. With a powerful punch, he sent the sludge villain flying, freeing Izuku. Gasping for air, Izuku looked up at his savior, All Might, who expressed relief at having arrived just in time. However, Izuku fainted from the shock of the encounter. When he regained consciousness, All Might was gently patting his face. All Might expressed his concern, relieved that Izuku was okay. He apologized for the chaos caused by the villain chase and showed Izuku the captured villain contained in a water bottle. Still in disbelief that the #1 hero was in front of him, Izuku searched his journal for an autograph, only to find that All Might had already signed it while he was unconscious. Izuku expressed his gratitude for the rescue and the autograph, bowing repeatedly. All Might, brushing it off as part of his job, prepared to take the villain to the police. As he began to leave, Izuku mustered the courage to call out to him, but All Might leaped into the air, only to realize that Izuku was clinging to his leg. All Might urged him to let go, but Izuku insisted that he would fall if he did. Acknowledging the height they were at, All Might agreed to listen to Izuku's question once they landed safely on the roof of a nearby building. Breathing heavily, Izuku asked if it was possible for him to become a hero as a late bloomer, given his diagnosis of being quirkless. All Might considered this, explaining that while it would be challenging, it was possible. He encouraged Izuku to work hard, assuring him that he could become a hero. Izuku felt tears of joy welling in his eyes as All Might gave him a thumbs up. Thanking All Might, he was surprised when the hero addressed him by name, realizing that All Might had seen his journal. All Might bid farewell and prepared to leave, but as he took off, he suddenly remembered that he needed to bring the villain in, wondering where the bottle had gone. Did I drop it? Izuku thought in a panic as he landed in an empty alleyway, steam rising from his body. It had been only a few minutes since his conversation with All Might, and he was on his way home when he heard an explosion. Curious, he made his way through a large crowd gathered in the distance until he reached the front, standing next to a thin, skeletal-looking man. Izuku's eyes widened as he recognized the sludge villain causing chaos and holding Bakugo hostage. The villain attempted to take over Bakugo's body, but the explosive blonde fought back with his quirk. Izuku felt a surge of horror as he realized that the sludge villain had escaped from All Might because of his foolish question. Bakugo was suffering because of him. To make matters worse, none of the pro-heroes could do anything against the villain, and All Might was nowhere to be found. Seeing the fear and desperation in Bakugo's eyes, Izuku charged toward the sludge villain, shocking everyone around him. One of the pro-heroes, Death Arms, called out for him to stop, but Izuku pressed on. The sludge villain taunted him, and in a moment of bravery, Izuku threw his backpack at the villain as a distraction and leaped forward. He instinctively reached for Bakugo, trying to pull him free from the villain's grasp. The sludge villain warned him to stay out of his way, enveloping both teens in the thick sludge as they struggled to breathe. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Izuku's irises glowed a bright green, and an invisible force caused the sludge villain to explode. Both Izuku and Bakugo fell to the ground, stunned, as the villain began to reform. The villain shouted angrily, charging toward them, but then All Might arrived with a powerful strike that sent the villain flying apart. The civilians cheered as the pro-heroes gathered the remnants of the still-living sludge villain. Death Arms admitted that Izuku had given him a scare, expressing relief that everything had worked out but reminding him to leave the danger to the pros next time. Izuku nodded, feeling a mix of pride and shame. Suddenly, a powerful presence approached, and Izuku looked up to see the number 2 hero, Terrible Tornado, hovering in front of him. The crowd and the other pros fell silent, surprised by her sudden arrival. She commanded Izuku to talk with her, enveloping him in a bubble of psychokinetic energy. Before anyone could react, they soared into the sky, leaving everyone stunned. The scene shifted to Tatsumaki flying at great speeds while carrying Izuku in the bubble before landing in front of the Midoriya residence. She urged him to get inside, pushing him through the door where his mother and sister awaited him. Inko and Fubuki rushed to him, tears in their eyes, expressing their relief that he was safe. Izuku reassured them, pleading not to squeeze him too tightly. He then asked why they were there. Fubuki explained that she and Tatsumaki had come to visit but sensed he was in danger. Tatsumaki scolded Izuku for charging at a villain, reminding him that he was quirkless and could have been seriously harmed. Izuku insisted he couldn't let Bakugo get hurt. Tatsumaki questioned why he still considered Bakugo a friend after years of bullying. Izuku dismissed her concerns, insisting that his quirk had manifested when he faced the villain. Inko and Fubuki fell silent, surprised by his revelation. Izuku demonstrated his newfound ability by lifting the sofa off the living room floor. Fubuki was ecstatic, hugging him tightly and expressing her happiness that he could finally pursue his dream of becoming a hero. Tatsumaki, however, remained skeptical, pointing out that the entrance exams for hero academies were 10 months away and that Izuku wouldn't have enough time to master his quirk. Izuku argued that he would work harder than everyone else, but Tatsumaki countered that hard work wouldn't guarantee success. She urged him to reconsider his dreams, insisting that he couldn't become a hero. Inko intervened, scolding Tatsumaki for her tone. Izuku defended his aspirations, stating that All Might believed in him. Tatsumaki questioned his encounter with the hero, but Izuku explained that All Might had saved him earlier that day, given him an autograph, and encouraged him to pursue his dreams, even as a late bloomer. Tatsumaki scoffed, suggesting that All Might had only said that to spare his feelings. But the truth is, Izuku, you can't be a hero. Her words struck Izuku deeply, causing his heartbeat to race, his muscles to tense, and tears to fill his eyes. Overwhelmed, he rushed out of the house, tears streaming down his face. Fubuki called out for him to wait, while Inko cried out for her son, both trying to follow him, but Tatsumaki remained silent in the living room. Fubuki attempted to use her psychokinesis to catch up with Izuku, but he propelled himself away with his own quirk, moving like a bullet. She shouted his name, but it was too late. He was already out of sight. Time passed, and Izuku found himself in an alleyway, wiping away his tears. He muttered to himself, frustrated with Tatsumaki's words. Suddenly, All Might appeared, announcing his presence with a booming voice. Izuku was startled to see him and asked what he was doing there. All Might explained that he had been searching for him after he vanished. Izuku was surprised to learn that All Might had been looking for him. All Might wanted to discuss something important and inquired about Tatsumaki's actions. Izuku revealed that she was his older sister, and the same went for Hellish Blizzard. He was their little brother. All Might was taken aback by this revelation, realizing he had no idea they were related. All Might pressed further, asking why Tatsumaki had taken him away. Izuku hesitated, mentioning it was a family matter. All Might quickly changed the subject, suggesting they talk in private. As steam began to rise from All Might's body, Izuku raised an eyebrow, concerned for his well-being. All Might insisted they move and leaped into the air, landing in an empty parking lot. Izuku was worried as All Might seemed to be overheating. All Might reassured him that it was normal for him. Then, to Izuku's shock, All Might transformed into his true form, a frail-looking man. Izuku gasped, questioning if he was really All Might. Toshinori confirmed his identity but then coughed, alarming Izuku once more. All Might explained that he had sustained a grave injury from a villain 5 years prior, which had severely damaged his respiratory system and required surgery. He revealed that he could only perform hero work for about 3 hours a day now. Izuku recalled that it was around the time of the battle with Toxic Chainsaw, but All Might clarified that the details of his injury had been kept secret to maintain hope among the public. He was running out of time and needed a successor. Izuku was taken aback by the idea of being a successor. All Might explained that his quirk, One for All, had been passed down through generations, granting immense power. Izuku was astonished by the concept of a quirk being inherited and questioned whether he was worthy. All Might pointed out that Izuku had acted heroically by rushing to save someone earlier, indicating that he had the instincts of a true hero. Despite All Might's encouragement, Izuku declined the offer. He explained that he had just received his own quirk and needed to focus on preparing for the UA entrance exams. He believed there might be someone else better suited to inherit All Might's power. All Might respected Izuku's decision and asked him to keep the conversation a secret. Izuku promised he would. As 10 months passed, Izuku dedicated himself to his studies and training, determined to prove everyone wrong and fulfill his dream of becoming a hero. His parents supported him unconditionally, and although Fubuki offered to train him, he declined. Tatsumaki had not visited since their last encounter. At school, the bullying subsided as Izuku was no longer quirkless, and even Bakugo kept his distance. On the day of the UA entrance exams, Izuku stood confidently at the entrance, ready to showcase his abilities as a late bloomer. After completing the written exam, he joined hundreds of other examinees in the assembly room for the practical exam. Present Mike, the pro hero, took the stage to explain the practical exam details, including the types of robots and the points they were worth, along with the time limit. He encouraged everyone to give their best effort. As Izuku made his way to his assigned test site, he waited patiently for the exam to begin when Present Mike urged everyone to start without hesitation. He urged the students to run into the simulated city. Izuku quickly activated his quirk, levitating off the ground and speeding past the other examinees, who watched in astonishment. Once he was a safe distance away, he stopped using his quirk and sprinted toward a three-pointer robot. Extending his hand, he used his psychokinesis to lift a lamp post and impale the machine with it. Spotting a one-pointer and a two-pointer up ahead, he slammed them together, crushing them before sending them rolling toward a dozen other robots like a bowling ball. Minutes passed as Izuku accumulated points, counting them as he went. He thought to himself that he had scored 100 points and decided he had done enough, allowing the other examinees to take on the remaining robots since he had more than enough to pass. Just as he contemplated leaving, the ground began to shake, and he looked up in shock at the sight of the massive zero-pointer robot. Panic spread among the examinees as they fled, and Izuku considered making his own escape. However, he heard shouting from the direction of the zero-pointer and turned to see a muscular red-haired boy trying to outrun the colossal machine. Izuku watched in horror as the giant foot of the zero-pointer descended, about to crush the boy. In a moment of panic, he pushed his quirk to its limits, freezing the zero-pointer in place with its foot just inches away from the boy. Both were stunned, unsure of what was happening until they noticed Izuku in the distance. He shouted for the boy to get out of there. The red-haired boy thanked him as he sprinted past. Izuku maintained his hold on the zero-pointer, trying to give the others time to escape, but the machine began to break free, its foot crashing down. The shockwave nearly knocked Izuku off his feet, but he held firm, even as blood began to trickle from his nose due to the strain of overusing his quirk. The boy noticed this and stopped in his tracks, alarmed by the sight of Izuku's blood. Eventually, Izuku could no longer sustain his power and cried out in pain, releasing his hold on the zero-pointer and collapsing to the ground. He looked up to see the giant robot looming over him, only to be lifted by the same red-haired boy he had just saved. The boy asked if he was okay, and Izuku replied that he would be fine despite the overexertion. The boy introduced himself as Eijiro Kirishima and asked Izuku's name. Izuku introduced himself, and Kirishima insisted that he couldn't leave him behind after being saved. As they fled, Kirishima panicked, realizing the zero-pointer was closing in. Izuku spotted a girl ahead who leaped into the air toward the zero-pointer. In a breathtaking moment, she punched the robot with such force that it toppled onto its back. Kirishima exclaimed in amazement, while Izuku marveled at her strength, wondering if she could be All Might's successor. However, his admiration quickly turned to fear as he saw her plummeting from a great height, screaming in pain. In a desperate move, Izuku raised his arm and used his quirk to stop her fall. She was startled to see him, blood dripping from his mouth before he coughed and lost consciousness, but not before gently placing her down. Kirishima looked at him in shock, calling out to him as he tried to wake him up. Izuku awoke in the nurse's office with a throbbing headache. His mother and sister rushed to him, hugging him tightly. His father intervened, allowing him to breathe as Izuku took a deep breath. He assured them he was fine, but was shocked to learn he had been unconscious for 3 hours. His family reassured him that his well-being was what mattered most, and they prepared to take him home. A week passed since the entrance exams, and Izuku anxiously awaited his results. His mother burst in with a letter from Yue, and he eagerly took it to his room. Inside, he found a small object that activated to reveal a projection of All Might. The hero congratulated him on passing the entrance exams with 100 villain points, explaining that he also earned 45 rescue points for saving 2 fellow examinees, bringing his total to 165 points. He was officially accepted as a student of UA High School. Outside his room, his mother paced nervously until his father reassured her that their son had likely done well. When Izuku opened the door with a smile, he confirmed that he had passed. His father expressed pride in him, just like his sisters, while his mother beamed with joy. Tears filled Inko's eyes as she hugged Izuku tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. She cried out, expressing her joy and pride in her son becoming a hero. Hisashi, with a hint of humor, reminded her to keep the tears in check. As Izuku prepared to leave for you, Inko grabbed his hand, her worry evident as she asked if he had everything he needed. Hisashi playfully pulled her away, reassuring her that their son was ready for anything. Izuku smiled at his mother, promising to see them later before stepping out of the house, leaving Inko with a sigh. Once alone, Hisashi playfully leaned against the wall, making Inko blush with his sudden closeness. She felt flustered but couldn't help but admire him, her heart racing as he lifted her into his arms and carried her away. Later, Izuku arrived at UA, navigating the bustling halls in search of his classroom. He finally found the large door labeled 1A and hesitated before taking a deep breath and entering. Inside, he was met with the sight of his classmates. Ida immediately reprimanded someone for resting their feet on a desk, while Bakugo dismissed the concern with indifference. Izuku felt a mix of surprise and familiarity seeing Bakugo again, recalling their past encounters. Kirishima approached Izuku, expressing relief at seeing him after the entrance exams and asking how he had been. Izuku was glad to see Kirishima and mentioned how unexpected it was to be in the same class. Just then, a girl with brown hair recognized him, calling him Psychic Boy from the entrance exam. She introduced herself as Ochako Uraraka, and Izuku introduced himself in return. Kirishima praised Uraraka for her performance during the exam, and they all shared a light moment. Uraraka thanked Izuku for saving her, to which he modestly brushed off the compliment, feeling a bit flustered by her proximity. Suddenly, a tired-looking man emerged from a yellow sleeping bag on the floor, startling everyone. He introduced himself as Shota Aizawa, their teacher, and wasted no time in announcing that they would be doing a quirk assessment test instead of the usual orientation. The students were taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. Aizawa explained that they would be using their quirks in physical exams, something they had never done before. He called on Izuku, who had scored the highest in the entrance exam, to demonstrate his abilities. After a brief moment of concentration, Izuku threw a softball with incredible force, leaving everyone in awe of his impressive distance. As the results displayed on a device, the class was shocked, even Bakugo, who couldn't hide his surprise. Excitement filled the room as Ishido and Siro expressed their eagerness to participate, but Aizawa quickly reminded them that this was not just a game. He warned that the student who finished last would be expelled, leaving the class in stunned silence. Uraraka voiced her concern, realizing the seriousness of their situation. Even if it wasn't the first day, it wasn't fair. Aizawa pointed out that the world was full of unfairness, from natural disasters to power-hungry villains and catastrophic accidents that could wipe out entire cities. He emphasized that it was a hero's job to combat that unfairness and that if they wanted to be professionals, they would have to push themselves to their limits. For the next 3 years, UA would present one challenge after another. He encouraged them to go beyond, in true plus ultra style, and to show him that their presence there was no mistake. As they prepared for the first test, the 50-meter dash, the students took their turns. Ida completed it in 3.04 seconds. Tsuyu Azui finished in 5.58 seconds. Uraraka used her quirk, Zero Gravity, to make her shoes lighter, completing it in 7.15 seconds. Yuga Aoyama finished in 5.51 seconds, while Katsuki Bakugo clocked in at 4.13 seconds. When it was Izuku's turn, he activated his quirk, levitating himself and launching forward like a bullet, completing the dash in just 1 second. Next came the grip strength test, where everyone used a device to measure their grip strength. Mizo Shoji achieved 540 kilograms, followed by a tall, muscular blonde girl who scored 670 kilograms. Izuku then used his psychokinesis quirk on the device without even touching it, resulting in an impressive 9,999 kilograms before it displayed an error. The standing long jump followed, where Izuku jumped as far as he could and then used his quirk to levitate himself over the sandbox. The sidestepping test was also easy for him, even without his quirk. During the softball throwing event, Izuku patiently waited for his classmates to finish since he had already received his result. No one managed to surpass Izuku's score, not even Bakugo, until Uraraka achieved a score of infinity. As Aizawa announced the overall scores, the students listened intently. Momo Yaoyorozu took the top spot, followed by Izuku Midoriya, Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugo, Tenya Ida, Fumikage Tokoyami, Kaya Akiyama, Mizo Shoji, Masahiro Ojiro, Eijiro Kirishima, Mina Ishido, Ochako Uraraka, Koji Koda, Tsuyu Azui, Yuga Aoyama, Hanta Siro, Denki Kaminari, Kyoka Jiro, Toru Hagakure, and finally, Minoru Mineta. Everyone looked at Mineta, the shortest student in Class 1A, who was in shock until Aizawa revealed that he had been lying. No one was going home. It was just a tactic to ensure they gave their all in the tests. Mineta fainted at the news. Aizawa then instructed them to pick up a syllabus from the classroom and head home. Izuku changed back into his school uniform in the locker room, picked up a syllabus, and exited the school. As he approached the school gate, Kirishima called out to him. He was surprised to see Kirishima and responded affirmatively when asked if he was heading home. Kirishima asked if he could tag along, mentioning how Izuku had saved him from the zero-pointer during the entrance exam, which he considered very manly. Izuku thanked him and returned the compliment. Uraraka joined them, glad to have caught up with the two boys. They all exited the school gates together, forming a new friendship. As time passed, Class 1A went about their daily routine until All Might made a grand entrance, announcing his arrival with enthusiasm. The students were shocked and then excited to see him. They discussed his Silver Age costume, feeling nostalgic. All Might welcomed them to Hero Basic Training and announced that their first activity would be battle training. He revealed a hidden mechanical wall filled with briefcases containing their hero costumes. After changing, the students gathered at Ground Beta, where Izuku proudly wore his costume, a black suit, a white button-up shirt, and a black tie. Kirishima complimented him, and Uraraka joined in, expressing her admiration for both boys' costumes. All Might gathered everyone's attention and explained that they would be engaging in indoor battle training, splitting into hero and villain teams for 2-on-2 battles. He emphasized the importance of gaining experience in real situations, as they would be facing off against actual people, not robots. The villains would hide a bomb in their hideout, while the heroes had to either capture the villains or secure the bomb within a limited time. Teams were formed at random, with Izuku paired with Kirishima. The excitement built as they prepared for their first real challenge as heroes. They were a team. Izuku pondered the situation, wondering about the odds they faced. All Might announced the first matchup. Team A would play the heroes, and Team D would take on the role of villains. As he spoke, Izuku glanced at Bakugo, who was glaring back at him. All Might continued, informing them that the villain team would enter first, and the exercise would commence in 5 minutes. The heroes would follow shortly after, while the rest would observe through CCTV. With that, Bakugo and Akiyama headed into the building. Izuku turned to Kirishima, expressing his desire to discuss a plan. Kirishima agreed, curious about Izuku's thoughts. Izuku explained that Bakugo would likely target him, so he intended to confront him directly. While he kept Bakugo occupied, Kirishima could sneak past to reach the bomb and deal with Akiyama. Kirishima thought the plan sounded solid but questioned why Bakugo would focus on Izuku. Izuku revealed their history, mentioning that they had grown up together but that Bakugo had started bullying him after developing his quirk. Kirishima was shocked to hear this, realizing that Bakugo's earlier look made sense. Meanwhile, Team D made their way to the top floor, reaching the fake bomb. Akiyama asked Bakugo if he had any ideas, but Bakugo remained silent as he walked toward the doorway. Akiyama urged him to come up with a plan first, but Bakugo declared his intent to confront Izuku. Akiyama protested, noting that it would be a 2-on-1 situation, but Bakugo dismissed her concerns and rushed out of the room, leaving Akiyama frustrated and deciding to guard the bomb. All Might's voice echoed through the microphone, signaling the start of the exercise. Izuku and Kirishima entered the building, quickly making their way to the second floor. As they ran down the hallway, Bakugo suddenly leaped out from a corner. Kirishima shouted a warning and tackled him out of the way just before Bakugo unleashed an explosion that missed them both. They quickly regained their footing, facing Bakugo, who emerged from the dust with a fierce grin. Izuku reminded Kirishima to stick to the plan, asserting that he would take on Bakugo. Kirishima encouraged him and then dashed in the opposite direction to flank their opponent. Izuku stood firm as Bakugo charged at him with a wild smile. Bakugo shouted his intent to defeat Izuku, but Izuku countered by using his psychokinesis to throw Bakugo against the wall. Izuku declared that he was no longer the quirkless Deku Bakugo once knew. He had a quirk now, just like his sisters, and he was determined to become a hero. Akiyama, monitoring the situation through their earpieces, called out to Bakugo, demanding to know what was happening. Bakugo, frustrated, told her to focus on the bomb and insisted he would take down Izuku. Akiyama expressed her exasperation, wishing for a better partner. Bakugo picked himself up, readying small explosions in his hands as he glared at Izuku. He challenged Izuku to face him, but Izuku levitated off the ground and zoomed away. Bakugo, taken aback, quickly recovered and propelled himself after Izuku using his explosions. Izuku led Bakugo through the building like a maze for a while before stopping to face him. Bakugo charged in, shouting a threat as he unleashed an explosion. Izuku raised a psychic barrier just in time to block the attack. Bakugo, frustrated, bombarded the barrier with more explosions, but Izuku held his ground, struggling to maintain the barrier. Meanwhile, Kirishima stealthily made his way to the top floor, keeping out of sight as he approached the doorway. He informed Izuku through the earpiece that he was on the top floor and ready to confront Akiyama, who was with the bomb. Izuku acknowledged this and promised to join him as soon as possible. Kirishima then burst into the room, calling out to Akiyama. Akiyama recognized that either Kirishima or Izuku would eventually reach her, blaming Bakugo for the delay. Kirishima stated that since Izuku was preoccupied with Bakugo, it was only fair for him to fight Akiyama. She questioned his decision not to sneak in, to which Kirishima proudly replied that sneaking was unmanly. "If I'm going to win, I'm going to do it head-on." Akiyama prepared herself, clenching her fists like a boxer, while Kirishima hardened his arms and body. They charged toward one another, fists drawn back. Their fists collided, and they locked eyes for a moment before stepping back to throw more punches. Akiyama aimed for a jab, but Kirishima dodged and tackled her to the floor, using his shorter height to his advantage. He pulled out his capture tape, ready to wrap it around her wrist, but Akiyama grabbed the tape and tossed it aside. Kirishima lunged to catch it but was too late as Akiyama kicked him off. He grunted as he hit the wall but quickly got back up, just as Akiyama let out a fierce battle cry. Kirishima raised his arms to block Akiyama's flurry of punches, his hardening quirk absorbing the impact as he was pinned against the wall. He waited for the right moment, then countered with a punch to Akiyama's face, causing her to stumble back. A grin spread across his face as he launched into his own series of hardened punches. Akiyama managed to block and dodge most of them but took a few hits. She leaped back to create distance, taking deep breaths as she noticed blood from her nose, a result of Kirishima's counterattack. Meanwhile, Izuku was maintaining his barrier against Bakugu's relentless explosions, refusing to relent. Bakugu paused, leaping back to gain distance. He smirked at Izuku, who looked confused. Bakugu explained that the sweat on his palms was similar to nitroglycerin and that his gauntlets had been storing it up. He aimed one of the grenade-like gauntlets at Izuku and pulled the pin. All Might's voice echoed through the microphone, warning Bakugu not to use his explosive power. He cautioned that it could be dangerous. Bakugu retorted that Izuku would be fine as long as he dodged or if his barrier held up. With a psychotic smile, he yanked the pin, and a massive explosion erupted from his gauntlet, shaking the building and interrupting the fight between Kirishima and Akiyama. Kirishima and Akiyama shouted in surprise, realizing it had to be Bakugu causing the commotion. Back with Bakugu, he wore a huge smirk as part of the building blew off. However, his expression shifted to shock when the smoke cleared, revealing Izuku completely unharmed behind his psychic barrier. Bakugu couldn't believe that even his strongest blast hadn't been enough to break through. In a fit of anger, Bakugu yelled at Izuku, questioning if he was some kind of monster like his sister. Izuku glared back, using his telekinesis to grab Bakugu and fling him across the room before slamming him against the ceiling. Bakugu fell to the floor with a loud thud, unconscious. Izuku, breathing heavily, quickly checked on his childhood friend, sighing in relief when he confirmed Bakugu was still breathing. Seizing the opportunity, he bound Bakugu with capture tape. With that done, Izuku levitated off the floor and zoomed up the stairs, reaching the top in less than a second. He saw Akiyama, bruised and bleeding, still fighting Kirishima, who was losing stamina as he struggled to keep up with her. As Akiyama prepared for another attack, Izuku extended his arm and paralyzed her with his psychokinesis. Kirishima greeted Izuku with excitement, thanking him for his help. Izuku urged him to secure the bomb. Kirishima touched the bomb, claiming victory. All Might's voice came through the mic, announcing that the hero team had won and instructing the students to exit the building and head to the CCTV room. Transport robots appeared to carry Bakugu to the nurse's office. Later, Izuku, Kirishima, and Akiyama joined All Might and the rest of Class 1A in the monitor room. All Might asked who the MVP of the exercise was. Yaoyorozu spoke up, praising Izuku for his strategic thinking and efficient use of his quirk, which allowed him to remain unscathed and helped Kirishima locate the bomb. She pointed out that Bakugu had acted recklessly, causing unnecessary damage, while Akiyama had been forced to guard the bomb due to Bakugu's actions. Kirishima chimed in, insisting that sneaking in would have been unmanly. All Might agreed with Yaoyorozu and moved on to the next match. As Todoroki and Shoji took on the roles of heroes, Ojiro and Hagakure became the villains. Uraraka complimented Izuku on his performance, noting that Bakugu couldn't even touch him. Izuku blushed at the praise. Kirishima turned to Akiyama, commenting on her impressive height and strength. Akiyama confirmed it was a compliment, and they exchanged details about their workout routines, with Kirishima expressing admiration for her dedication. Akiyama laughed, appreciating Kirishima's enthusiasm and admitting that she liked him. Kirishima eagerly suggested trading contacts, and the two exchanged phone numbers. The second matchup concluded swiftly as Todoroki utilized his ice quirk, freezing the entire building and leaving Ojiro and Hagakure unable to move. All Might announced that Team F would take on the role of heroes while Team J would be the villains. Siro and Uraraka entered the building first, ready to play their parts. The bomb was located on the third floor, and Uraraka and Shiro began strategizing. Shiro proposed a plan, using his tape quirk to create barriers between the bomb and the doorway. Uraraka agreed, noting that the tape would slow down their opponents. She then used her zero-gravity quirk on their costumes to reduce their weight, explaining that it would help them move faster, especially since Ida was quite speedy. Shiro acknowledged the difference and complimented her quirk. They discussed how to take down Koda and Ida, with Uraraka suggesting that Shiro distract them with his tape while she used her quirk to make them weightless. Shiro thought it was a solid plan, and All Might signaled the start of the exercise. As Koda and Ida entered the building, the hero team quickly made their way to the third floor. They rushed through a hallway when Shiro appeared, shooting tape at them. Ida tackled Koda to avoid the tape, but as they hit the ground, Uraraka leaped from her hiding spot and tagged Ida, causing him to float up to the ceiling. Koda, in panic, attempted to punch Uraraka, but she was thrown against the wall. Ida exclaimed his surprise at being weightless, while Koda jumped to try and pull him back down, but it was futile. Ida warned Koda of Uraraka's approach just in time for her to leap onto him, wrapping capture tape around Koda's neck. All Might announced Koda's capture, noting his disappointment at the quick defeat. Uraraka comforted him, encouraging him not to cry as he made his way to the exit. Ida, determined not to let the villains win, proclaimed his resolve. He then used his leg engines to propel himself through the air, surprising Uraraka. Shiro attempted to stop him with tape, but Ida was too fast. Uraraka jumped onto Shiro to help pull Ida down, but they were both dragged across the floor. Ida declared their surrender would ensure their safety, but he soon found himself ensnared by the tape Shiro had left behind. Shiro remarked on how things could have gone better as Uraraka wrapped capture tape around Ida. All Might declared the villain team the winners and instructed everyone to exit the building and head to the CCTV room. As Uraraka and Shiro helped Ida out of the tape, they met up with All Might and the rest of Class 1A in the monitor room. All Might asked who the MVP was for the exercise, and Yaoyorozu pointed out that Ida had played a crucial role, while Uraraka and Shiro's strategy had been effective but not enough to capture him. All Might confirmed that Ida was indeed the MVP and thanked Yaoyorozu for her insight. Izuku praised Uraraka for her performance, to which she responded modestly, not wanting to be flattered. Izuku expressed his admiration for her abilities but then grew curious about why she hadn't used her full power during the training. Uraraka explained that while her power was strong, it came at a cost, as it had previously resulted in her injuries. Izuku understood the sacrifice involved in wielding such power and noted it in his hero journal, which intrigued his classmates. As time passed, everyone continued with their training without any issues. Izuku approached Recovery Girl's office, where he found her alone. He inquired about Bakugu's whereabouts, and she informed him that Bakugu had left not long ago. Izuku thanked her and headed toward the exit, spotting Bakugu near the school gate. He called out to him, but Bakugu turned with anger in his eyes. Bakugu accused Izuku of gloating, but Izuku quickly clarified that he was there to apologize for their earlier encounter during training. Bakugu, still upset, expressed his frustration not only at being hurt but also at losing to Izuku. He declared that he would defeat Izuku next time, urging him to enjoy his victory while it lasted. It would never happen again, he thought as he stormed away, not uttering another word. Izuku let out a sigh as the day came to an end. The following morning, on his way to school, he was stopped by reporters bombarding him with questions about All Might as a UA teacher. He pushed through, asking them to let him pass, as he couldn't afford to be late for class. Once inside the school gates, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. Aizawa addressed Class 1A, commending them on their performance during the previous day's battle training. He had reviewed the video feed and analyzed each team's results. The students listened intently, curious about what was next. Aizawa informed them that their first task would be to select a class representative. The class sighed in relief at the news. Kirishima eagerly declared his interest in the position, followed by several others expressing their desire to lead. Ida, however, called for silence, emphasizing the importance of trust and leadership. He proposed a democratic election to determine their representative. Some students voiced concerns about the idea, questioning how well they knew each other and whether anyone would receive votes beyond themselves. Ida reassured them that the person with the most votes would likely be the most suitable candidate. Aizawa, uninterested, instructed them to make a decision before his nap ended. The class voted, resulting in Izuku receiving 5 votes and Yaoyorozu 2. Aizawa announced that Izuku would be the class representative, with Yaoyorozu as the deputy. After the election, everyone headed to the cafeteria for lunch, where Izuku joined Kirishima, Uraraka, Akiyama, and Ida. Ida expressed his admiration for Izuku's strategic skills, explaining that this was why he had voted for him. Uraraka, curious, pointed out that Ida seemed like a suitable candidate himself. Akiyama echoed Ida's sentiments, and Kirishima added his support, admitting that he initially wanted to be class rep but believed Izuku was the better choice. Uraraka then asked Ida about his family's wealth, leading him to reveal that the Ida family had a legacy of heroes. Kirishima was astonished to learn that Ida's older brother was Ingenium, a well-known hero. He then shared that he had an older sister who was also a hero, revealing her identity as Captain Mizuki, which left the group in awe. As they discussed their inspirations for becoming heroes, the school alarms suddenly blared, announcing a security breach. Panic ensued as students rushed toward the exits, shoving and crowding each other. Izuku found himself pressed against a window, witnessing the chaos outside as teachers attempted to manage the situation. He called out for everyone to stop, but his voice was lost in the commotion. Kirishima and Akiyama tried to calm the crowd, while Uraraka was pushed away from Izuku. Frustrated and angry, Izuku shouted for Uraraka to help him float. With some effort, she managed to make contact, allowing him to levitate above the crowd. Gathering everyone's attention, Izuku shouted that there was no need to panic, it was just the press. He urged his classmates to act like UA students and exit the building calmly. His commanding presence silenced the crowd, and they followed his instructions. After the chaos subsided, Izuku apologized for his earlier outburst. Aizawa reassured him that he had done well in getting everyone to leave in an orderly manner. A week later, the class gathered for Aizawa's announcement regarding their training for the day. He informed them that All Might, himself, and another instructor would supervise their rescue training, preparing them for various disasters. Kaminari expressed his apprehension about the day ahead, while Kirishima reminded everyone that this was what being a hero was all about. The excitement was palpable as Class 1A boarded the bus, ready for their training at the off-campus facility. Aizawa, their teacher, reminded them to consider their costumes carefully, as some might hinder their abilities. Once everyone was settled, the bus set off towards their destination. As the bus ride continued, Azui turned to Uraraka, eager to share her thoughts. She mentioned having noticed a similarity between Uraraka's quirk and All Might's during the entrance exam, causing Uraraka to feel a bit flustered. Izuku, aware of Uraraka's struggles, understood the pressure she felt. Ashido chimed in, recalling how Uraraka had taken down the zero-pointer during the exam and questioned why she hadn't used that power in their classes. Izuku explained that while Uraraka could manipulate gravity to enhance her strength, the recoil was difficult for her to manage. Uraraka expressed her gratitude to Izuku for his support. Kirishima praised Uraraka's quirk, noting that while his hardening ability was useful in battles, it lacked the flashiness of some other quirks. Akiyama added that Kirishima had given her a tough time during training, prompting a moment of silence from the class, which she quickly lightened with a sheepish joke. Kaminari reminded everyone that heroes also needed to consider their popularity, while Aoyama boasted about his naval laser. Ashido playfully pointed out the downside of using it when feeling unwell. Kirishima then shifted the conversation to the impressive quirks of Midoriya, Todoroki, and Baku. Azui remarked that Bakugo's temper might affect his popularity, which led to Bakugo's fiery response, prompting Izuku to intervene and calm the situation. Eventually, the bus arrived at the training facility, and Aizawa instructed the class to stay alert as they entered. The interior amazed them, resembling an amusement park filled with various disaster scenarios designed for training. 13, the instructor, explained the purpose of the facility, emphasizing the importance of being prepared for different emergencies. Aizawa inquired about All Might's absence, and 13 shared some concerns about the situation. Just as they were about to begin, the lights flickered ominously, and a portal opened, allowing a group of villains to emerge. Aizawa quickly warned the class to stay back, shocking them with the reality of their situation. Kirishima expressed disbelief at the presence of real villains, while Yaoyorozu questioned the lack of alarms. 13 acknowledged the situation's seriousness, and Todoroki speculated that the villains must possess a quirk that concealed their presence. Izuku noted the strategic choice of the facility as an entry point during a class session. Aizawa ordered 13 to evacuate the students and alert the main campus, realizing that the villains might be disrupting their communications. Izuku voiced his concern for Aizawa's safety, knowing that his fighting style was better suited for stealth rather than facing multiple opponents. Aizawa, however, reminded them that a true pro-hero must be adaptable and prepared for anything. 13 instructed the students to follow him as he leaped into the central plaza, taking down numerous villains single-handedly. 13 urged Class 1A to follow him toward the exit. Suddenly, a portal appeared between them and the exit, and a villain made of smoke emerged. Kurojairi introduced himself and his group, the League of Villains, expressing his delight in their encounter. He ominously noted that it was a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to meet his end, mentioning that he had expected All Might to be present. With a sinister tone, he declared that he still had a role to play. As Kirishima and Bakugo charged at the villain, Bakugo unleashed an explosion aimed at Kurojairi. Kirishima shouted that they wouldn't just stand by and let him have his way. However, as the smoke cleared, they realized their attacks had no effect. Kurojairi acknowledged their bravery but warned them to be cautious, or someone might get hurt. 13 shouted for the two to get out of the way, preparing to use his black hole quirk. Kurojairi threatened to scatter them across the facility, leading them to their demise. Izuku's eyes widened as he found himself in the ruins zone alongside Kirishima, Akiyama, and Baku. Meanwhile, Uraraka screamed as she fell into a body of water, realizing she had landed in the flood zone. She recalled the villain's words about wanting to kill All Might. Suddenly, a shark villain appeared, declaring he had found her and that it was nothing personal, but she should say goodbye. Uraraka panicked until Azui intervened, kicking the shark villain in the head. Azui quickly wrapped her tongue around Uraraka's waist and swam to the surface with Mineta in her other arm, reaching a boat where she placed Uraraka safely. Mineta made an inappropriate comment, which led to Azui slamming him onto the ship. Uraraka thanked Azui for her timely rescue, but they both recognized the trouble they were in. Uraraka speculated that the villains must have learned their schedule, recalling a previous incident when the press had infiltrated the school. She expressed her concern that the villains were prepared to kill All Might. Mineta insisted that there was no way they could succeed, believing that once All Might arrived, the villains would be defeated. Azui countered that they must have a plan, and the threat was real. Uraraka urged them not to doubt All Might's strength, affirming that he was the #1 hero. The shark villain resurfaced, furious and intent on attacking Uraraka. Mineta warned that more villains were approaching, prompting Uraraka to reflect on the day she met All Might. In a flashback, Uraraka, a junior high school student, was walking home when she saw a skeleton-like man named Toshinori Yagi, who was searching for a successor. After Izuku declined his offer, Toshinori continued his search. Suddenly, a car sped toward a little girl crossing the street, driven by a drunk driver. Toshinori prepared to intervene but saw Uraraka leap into action, tackling the girl out of harm's way just before the car nearly hit them. With everyone distracted, Toshinori transformed into his hero form and stopped the vehicle with his bare hands. The police arrived to arrest the driver, and All Might was surrounded by fans and reporters. He noticed Uraraka comforting the little girl and her parents, who expressed their gratitude for her bravery. Uraraka declared her aspiration to become a hero, wanting to help others. Later, as she continued her walk home, All Might appeared, introducing himself and asking for her name. After a brief conversation, he revealed his true form and the legacy of One for All, asking Uraraka if she would be his successor. Overwhelmed, she accepted his offer. As the flashback ended, Uraraka reflected on All Might's incredible heroism and questioned why anyone would want to harm him. Her expression turned serious as she resolved to fight back against the villains if there was even a chance they could harm All Might. Mineta panicked, suggesting they should hide until help arrived, but Azui slapped him with her tongue, urging him to regain his composure. Uraraka noted that the villains seemed to possess quirks suited for water, indicating that they needed to strategize their next move. They brought Tsu to the flood zone, which raised concerns among the group. Mineta questioned the reasoning behind it, and Uraraka speculated that the villains might not be aware of their quirks. If they were, they would have likely sent Tsu to a more dangerous area, like the fire zone. Azui noted that this could explain why the villains weren't trying to engage them. Azui introduced her quirk, Frog, explaining her abilities to jump high, stick to walls, and use her tongue to stretch up to 20 meters. She also mentioned her ability to expel her stomach contents to clean it and secrete a mildly irritating fluid, though she admitted those powers weren't very useful in combat. Uraraka shared her quirk, Zero Gravity, which allowed her to make anything she touched weightless. She could also manipulate her own gravity to enhance her strength, though it came with the risk of injury. Mineta chimed in with his quirk, Pop Off, revealing that his hair was made up of sticky ball that he could detach. He demonstrated by sticking one to the wall, explaining that depending on his emotions, they could adhere for a long time. However, he warned that if he took too many off too quickly, it would cause him to bleed, and he couldn't stick to them himself. As the group discussed their quirks, Mineta began to tear up, feeling inadequate. Uraraka tried to comfort him, insisting they needed to figure out how to use their abilities against the villains. Just then, one of the villains split the ship in two, causing panic. Azui remarked that it was a dire situation, and Mineta exclaimed that they were all going to die. Uraraka quickly assured them that she had a plan. The three huddled together as Uraraka explained her strategy. The shark villain taunted them, confident that the ship would soon sink and they would be doomed. Uraraka rallied her friends, asking if they were ready. Azui nodded, while Mineta remained frightened. With determination, Uraraka leaped off the side of the ship, aiming her hand at the water. She unleashed a powerful shockwave, creating a whirlpool that pulled the villains in. Azui jumped off the ship with Mineta on her back, wrapping her tongue around Uraraka for support. Mineta began throwing his sticky ball at the villains to help restrain them, while Azui landed safely in the water. They celebrated their victory, with Uraraka smiling and Mineta shedding tears of joy. After a few minutes, they reached the edge of the water and made their way to the central plaza. From a distance, they spotted Aizawa taking down villains one by one. Their attention was drawn to a gray-haired villain rushing toward their teacher with an outstretched hand. Aizawa managed to elbow the villain in the gut, but that was exactly what the hand villain wanted, as he seized Aizawa's elbow. Shigaraki revealed that he had observed Aizawa's movements and had figured out his tell. He taunted Aizawa, commenting on his quirk and how it was ineffective in prolonged battles against large groups. Despite the odds, Aizawa continued to fight off the remaining villains, but it was clear he was becoming fatigued. Shigaraki praised Aizawa for his bravery in the face of danger, but warned him that he was outmatched. As the battle raged on, Aizawa was confronted by a massive villain known as Nomu, who easily overpowered him. Shigaraki mocked Aizawa's quirk, asserting that it was insignificant against true power. Aizawa activated his quirk, but Nomu continued to overpower him, causing him to cry out in pain. Mineta couldn't bear to watch any longer and suggested they leave, while Azui echoed his sentiment, both feeling helpless as they witnessed their teacher's struggle. Meanwhile, the villains sent to the ruins zone had been defeated by Izuku, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Akiyama. Izuku decided to check on the others, urging caution as he rocketed toward the exit. Back at the main plaza, the warping villain, Kurojiri, appeared next to Shigaraki, confirming that the Rescue Hero 13 was out of commission. But there were students Shigaraki could not disperse, and one of them managed to escape the facility. Anger bubbled within him as he scratched his neck in frustration. He thought about Kurojiri and how, if he weren't their warp gate, he would have disintegrated every last atom in his body. With the possibility of dozens of pro-heroes showing up, it felt like game over. He had been looking forward to finishing this today. Frustrated, he decided it was time to go home. Mineta expressed his surprise, wondering if they were actually leaving. Azui confirmed what he heard, and Mineta felt relief wash over him, thinking they were safe without having to fight. He hugged Azui, but she quickly retaliated, feeling uncomfortable with his touch. Shigaraki, however, had other plans. Before leaving, he wanted to ensure the symbol of peace was broken. He intended to crush their spirits by targeting one of the students. As he approached, his hand extended toward Azui, and Uraraka's eyes widened in horror at the thought of Azui being harmed. But just as Shigaraki's hand reached her, nothing happened. Aizawa had used his erasure quirk to save her. Shigaraki acknowledged Aizawa's intervention, but then the Nomu slammed the teacher's face into the ground. Seizing the moment, Uraraka channeled all her strength into her fist and lunged toward Shigaraki, determined to protect her friend. Shigaraki commanded the Nomu to attack, but Uraraka's fist collided with the creature's chest. To her surprise, her arm held firm, but her relief turned to horror when she realized her attack had no effect on the Nomu. Shigaraki smirked, mocking her efforts, while the Nomu prepared to strike. Suddenly, the Nomu froze in place, and Shigaraki yelled in frustration. Before he could react, Izuku arrived at the plaza, using his psychokinesis to restrain both Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Uraraka called out to him, relieved to see him. Azui quickly took charge, urging everyone to help Aizawa as they escaped the water. Mineta, however, was distracted and warned them just in time. Izuku turned to see the Nomu leaping toward him at an alarming speed. He had no choice but to release Shigaraki and Kurogiri, creating a force field to block the Nomu's attack. The impact was so powerful that it shattered his barrier, sending him crashing into a wall. Izuku groaned as he hit the wall hard, but before he could recover, the Nomu grabbed him and slammed him back into the wall, causing him immense pain. Uraraka cried out for him as he struggled, coughing up blood. Suddenly, the doors to the USJ burst open, and everyone looked on in shock and relief as All Might appeared, his expression serious rather than his usual heroic smile. He explained that he had rushed to the scene after hearing from young Ida about the situation. Upon seeing the injured 13, Aizawa, and Izuku, his fists clenched in anger. He declared that the villains were making his blood boil and reassured the students that he was there to help. As he prepared to confront the villains, Shigaraki acknowledged his arrival. All Might moved with incredible speed, rescuing Izuku from the Nomu's grasp and bringing him to safety. He apologized to Izuku, who groaned in pain, and instructed everyone to take Aizawa and Izuku to safety while he dealt with the villains. Uraraka warned All Might about Shigaraki, expressing her concern that her attack had not been strong enough. All Might reassured her with a smile and a peace sign before charging toward Shigaraki. As All Might confronted the Nomu, he attempted to attack, but the creature absorbed the blow without flinching. Realizing the Nomu's strength, All Might decided to change his approach. He managed to get behind the creature and prepared to suplex it into the ground. However, Kurogiri intervened, creating a warp gate that allowed the Nomu to grab All Might, causing him to cough up blood. Izuku, Uraraka, Azui, and Mineta watched in shock as All Might struggled against the Nomu's grip, blood staining his shirt. Shigaraki smirked, pleased with Kurogiri's timing, as All Might fought to free himself from the creature's hold. With his strength, he would pull All Might halfway through the warp gate, and then close it, threatening to split him in two. As the Nomu began to drag All Might toward the gate, Uraraka and Izuku shouted in alarm, calling out to him. Just then, Bakugo soared in, launching an explosive attack on Kurogiri's collar, pinning him to the ground. Suddenly, Todoroki arrived, and the right side of the Nomu's body began to freeze. Shigaraki narrowly dodged a punch from Kirishima, only to be knocked back by Akiyama, who sent his hand flying. All Might noticed the Nomu's grip loosening and seized the opportunity to break free just before its right arm turned to ice. Bakugo warned the Nomu not to move, threatening to blast it away. Kirishima pointed out that Bakugo's words weren't very heroic. Shigaraki, having retrieved his hand, observed the situation with a smirk, noting that the kids were impressive and that their league of villains should be ashamed. He commanded the Nomu to eliminate Bakugo to regain control of the warp gate. The Nomu, despite its body falling apart, used sheer muscle to lift itself out of the warp gate and back on its feet, its right arm and side shattering from the ice. Izuku was puzzled about how it could still move. All Might shouted for everyone to get back, expressing confusion about the Nomu's quirk, which he thought was shock absorption. Shigaraki clarified that it was also capable of super regeneration, designed specifically to defeat All Might. In an instant, the teens found themselves at a safe distance from the battle, with Uraraka exclaiming in surprise. They were unaware that All Might had moved faster than they could see, saving Bakugo and bringing them to safety. Azui suggested they leave while they could, concerned about Aizawa and Izuku's injuries. Uraraka agreed, and Akiyama declared they would support All Might. All Might insisted they leave, while Todoroki acknowledged that things could have gone worse without their intervention. All Might thanked them for their help but urged them to watch as he prepared to take the fight seriously. Reluctantly, the students began to retreat toward the entrance. Uraraka carried Izuku, who looked back as All Might clashed with the Nomu, creating a shockwave that forced everyone to their knees. Shigaraki shouted that All Might's quirk was shock absorption, to which All Might responded with a determined attitude as they exchanged powerful blows, generating more shockwaves. The force of their battle was so intense that the teens struggled to keep their eyes open. All Might pushed himself to his limits, and as the Nomu's shock absorption reached its breaking point, he gained the upper hand, throwing the creature to the ground and creating a large crater. Before the Nomu could regain its footing, All Might appeared before it, ready to deliver a lesson. He declared his iconic phrase, channeling all his strength into a punch that sent the Nomu flying through the roof and into the clouds above. The teens were in awe, with Kirishima commenting that it was like something out of a hero manga, while Akiyama noted that All Might had overcome the Nomu's abilities. Bakugo marveled at All Might's power, realizing he had struck so quickly that the Nomu's regeneration couldn't keep up. All Might, though injured, stood tall, reflecting on how he had grown weaker over time. He noted that in his prime, it would have taken only a few hits to take down the Nomu, but now it had taken over 300. Izuku and Uraraka admired him with awe. All Might declared the villains defeated and urged them to surrender so they could end things quickly. Shigaraki, frustrated, exclaimed that All Might had cheated and that they were outmatched. He was shocked by the damage done to his Nomu and questioned the information he had received. Just then, a feminine voice interrupted, and Shigaraki turned to see a woman in a white and black dress, wearing a mask and a hood. She introduced herself as White Hood, revealing she had been sent in case the Nomu failed. As she extended her hand toward All Might, he felt an invisible force squeezing his injury, causing him to cry out in pain. Wondered if her quirk was similar to Midoriya's. White Hood noted that All Might was no longer in his prime, and the fact that he struggled against the Nomu proved it. She urged Shigaraki to take the opportunity to finish All Might off. Shigaraki, seeing All Might in pain, smiled wickedly and prepared to attack. Bakugo, along with Kirishima, Akiyama, and Todoroki, rushed to help All Might. However, White Hood used her quirk to pin them to the ground, rendering them unable to move. Uraraka watched in horror as Shigaraki and Kurojairi approached All Might, imagining the worst. In a moment of desperation, Uraraka put Izuku down and used her power to leap toward the central plaza. Above All Might, she unleashed a powerful smash, creating a shockwave that knocked her to the ground. All Might called out to her, noticing her injuries as she lay there with a broken arm and legs. He felt a surge of pain as Shigaraki and Kurojairi were now close, trapped in psychic force fields alongside White Hood. She acknowledged Uraraka's valiant effort, but she was afraid to say they had only delayed the inevitable. As the eye holes of the woman's mask began to glow a light blue, Uraraka gasped, clutching her throat with her one good hand as the villainess exerted her mental grip on her. All Might shouted in desperation, urging her to stop as White Hood continued to use her psychokinesis against both One for All users. The villainess commanded Shigaraki and Kurojairi to move towards them, instructing them to eliminate All Might and Uraraka. Izuku's eyes widened in horror as he witnessed All Might, Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Bakugo, and Todoroki pinned to the ground by the psychic villain while Shigaraki and Kurojairi approached. Lying on the stairs with several broken ribs, he felt powerless. Closing his eyes, he cursed himself for not being strong enough, contemplating that perhaps Tatsumaki was right about him. Suddenly, a surge of anger coursed through Izuku, and he opened his eyes to reveal a glowing green hue. He managed to stand, extending his hand to pin Shigaraki and Kurogiri to the ground with tremendous force, cracking the surface beneath them. The villains let out cries of pain as the sound of cracking bone and metal echoed around them. Izuku then released them, propelling himself in front of Uraraka and All Might. He shouted for them to be released, and with a wave of his hand, he unleashed a psychokinetic push that knocked White Hood to the ground, breaking her hold on the others. Quickly recovering, White Hood looked at Izuku with wide eyes beneath her mask, while he glared back at her. The Esper teen raised both hands towards the USJ dome, causing a loud rumble as the facility shook. Izuku strained to muster all the power from his quirk, managing to rip the dome away. Everyone watched in shock as the metal and concrete morphed into sharp spikes, aimed down at the villains. Izuku focused his mind to create force fields for All Might, Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Bakugo, Todoroki, and himself. Blood trickled from his nose and mouth as he let out a yell, launching all the spikes at the villains. White Hood cried out in fear, pulling Shigaraki and Kurogiri towards her with her psychokinesis, forming a protective bubble around them just in time as the spikes created a thick dust cloud. Izuku fell to his knees, blood still flowing as he struggled to maintain his focus. As the dust began to clear, he saw Kurogiri, despite his injuries, managing to create a warp gate while White Hood carried an injured Shigaraki. Before they could escape, she turned to meet Izuku's gaze, and he felt the smirk behind her mask as she acknowledged his strength. Once the villains slipped through the warp gate, Izuku's vision faded and he blacked out. Time passed, and he slowly opened his eyes to find himself in Recovery Girl's office. To his left, he saw Uraraka and a deflated All Might in their own beds. Uraraka exclaimed that he was awake, and Izuku greeted her. All Might sat up, and Uraraka hesitated, unsure of how to react. Toshinori reassured her that it was okay, explaining that Izuku already knew about his true form and one for all. Uraraka stared blankly at him before letting out a surprised scream, demanding to know why he had never told her. Toshinori explained that he had offered one for all to Izuku before they met, but he had declined the offer. Uraraka was astonished and questioned why he would turn it down. Izuku clarified that he had just manifested his quirk the same day Toshinori offered it, and with the UA entrance exams approaching, he felt it was better to focus on his own abilities. Uraraka expressed her frustration that he hadn't mentioned it, and Toshinori chuckled sheepishly. Izuku added that one for all was supposed to be a secret, and he had promised Toshinori not to discuss it after their first meeting. Just then, Recovery Girl entered, announcing that they had visitors. Toshinori quickly transformed back into All Might as Class 1A entered the room. Kirishima rushed to check on Izuku, while Azui and Ishido expressed their concern for everyone. All Might reassured them that they were all fine now, giving a thumbs up. Akiyama asked what had happened back at the USJ, and Kirishima marveled at how Izuku had torn the dome apart to protect them. Izuku explained that he had acted out of anger to save Uraraka and All Might. All Might praised Izuku for maintaining control and protecting them with his quirk, declaring that he would make a fine hero someday. Uraraka agreed, stating that if Izuku hadn't acted, they might not have made it. She chuckled, noting the irony that she had saved him during the entrance exams, and now he had saved her in the USJ, feeling they were even now. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the Midoriya family rushed in. Fubuki and Inko cried out for Izuku, squeezing him into a tight hug. Izuku protested, feeling overwhelmed. Hisashi, his father, commented on their tendency to overreact, while Inko and Fubuki insisted that they were worried about him after the attack. Hisashi reassured them that he was concerned too, but they often took things too far. Tatsumaki chimed in, agreeing with him. Izuku was no longer a baby. The short Esper's unexpected visit caught him off guard, as he hadn't seen or spoken to Tatsumaki in nearly a year. Tatsumaki greeted him with a simple, "Hey, Izu." They exchanged a moment of awkward silence until the rest of Class 1A burst into the room. The class, excluding Bakugo and Todoroki, exclaimed in unison, their voices filled with shock. Terrible tornado and hellish blizzard are your sisters? Izuku chuckled sheepishly, realizing he had forgotten to mention this detail. After the attack at the USJ, classes were cancelled the following day to allow students to recover, both physically and mentally. Kirishima expressed his lingering thoughts about the incident, and Akiyama echoed his sentiment. Ida suggested they should focus on moving forward instead of dwelling on the past. Uraraka asked if anyone knew who would be teaching them, to which Izuku replied that, given Mr. Aizawa's injuries, he doubted he would be able to teach for a while. Just then, the classroom door opened to reveal Hellish Blizzard. "Good morning, Class 1A, she announced. Azui asked if she was their substitute, and Fubuki clarified that they should call her Ms. Blizzard. She explained that she would be substituting until Aizawa fully healed, noting that he had insisted on teaching despite his injuries, which was why she volunteered. With a sigh, she expressed her concern about Aizawa's recovery. Fubuki then made it clear that just because Izuku was her brother, he would not receive any special treatment. As their temporary teacher, she expected all students to be treated equally. Kaminari and Mineta, however, couldn't help but admire her, only to feel a chill run down their spines when Izuku glared at them. Meanwhile, Tatsumaki was out in the city, using her psychokinesis to restrain a group of villains while the police handled their transport to jail. When she sneezed, a police officer asked if she was sick, to which she replied that she was fine but noted that someone was staring at her sister inappropriately. Back in Class 1A, Kaminari and Mineta found themselves lifted from their seats and stuck to the ceiling by Izuku's quirk. They pleaded for forgiveness, but Fubuki intervened, telling Izuku to put them down. She reassured the class that she was used to such behavior and warned Kaminari and Mineta not to distract themselves too much during class, or they would face extra homework. As the class settled down, Fubuki informed them that their fight was not over yet, bringing confusion and concern among the students. She explained that the UA Sports Festival was currently being organized. Kaminari questioned the timing of the festival so soon after the villain attack, and Jiro echoed his concerns about the potential for another attack during the event. Fubuki reassured them that the administration believed it was essential to demonstrate that the threat had been handled and that the school was safer than ever. She emphasized that the festival was a significant opportunity for all students at UA and that it could not be cancelled due to a few villains. Mineta questioned the importance of the festival, prompting Fubuki to passionately explain that the UA Sports Festival was one of the most watched events globally. She highlighted how it had replaced the Olympic Games in terms of significance for those interested in competition. Yaoyorozu supported her statement, reminding everyone that top heroes would be watching, and this was their chance to get scouted. Izuku added that many aspiring heroes joined pro-hero agencies after graduation, and Fubuki reinforced the idea that this festival was a crucial opportunity for them. She declared that none of them could afford to slack off on their training. The class responded with enthusiasm, and Fubuki, catching her breath, apologized for her outburst, explaining her passion for the sports festival as a UA graduate. She then dismissed the class. As the bell rang for lunch, Fubuki left the classroom while the students buzzed about the upcoming festival. Izuku smiled, noting everyone's excitement. Ida remarked on their enthusiasm, and Kirishima praised Fubuki's speech. Akiyama cautioned against getting too overexcited, while Uraraka encouraged Izuku to do their best, earning a smile from him. As they made their way to the cafeteria, they paused upon hearing laughter around the corner. All Might appeared, catching everyone by surprise, and announced that he was there for lunch. "Would the two of you like to eat with me?" All Might held up a bento, a cheerful smile on his face. Uraraka couldn't help but tease him, calling him like a schoolgirl while trying to suppress her laughter at her predecessor's enthusiasm. The three of them made their way to an empty room, where they took their seats opposite All Might, who settled comfortably on a couch. Izuku and Uraraka were taken aback when they learned that All Might's current limit was only 50 minutes. As he poured tea for the students, he explained that he could manage his muscle form for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half if he pushed himself. Both students lowered their heads, feeling the weight of his words. Uraraka expressed her concern, apologizing to All Might for the situation. All Might reassured them, insisting that they didn't need to apologize. He emphasized their similarities, sharing a laugh that was interrupted by a cough. He then shifted the conversation to the upcoming sports festival, noting that Uraraka still hadn't fully adjusted to One for All's power. He posed the question of how they would address this challenge. Uraraka admitted she was unsure and turned to Izuku for ideas. He inquired about her method of using One for All, and she explained how she channeled the power into her limbs. Izuku suggested that she try distributing the power throughout her entire body to reduce the strain on her limbs. Uraraka was impressed by this insight, calling him a genius, while Izuku humbly downplayed the compliment. All Might praised Izuku's suggestion, acknowledging his intelligence and noting his success in the entrance exams. He then expressed the urgency of their training, reminding them that he had limited time left as the symbol of peace. He entrusted Uraraka with the responsibility of inheriting his mantle, emphasizing the importance of the sports festival as a platform for her to announce her presence to the world. Uraraka, momentarily stunned, vowed to do her best, and All Might expressed his confidence in both her and Izuku. As they left for the cafeteria, Izuku clenched his fist, determined not to lose. Later, as Class 1A finished their day, they encountered a crowd of students blocking the exit. Uraraka was confused, while Izuku sought to understand why they were being obstructed. Bakugo, with his usual bravado, explained that the crowd was there to gauge the competition after their recent encounter with villains. He dismissed them, asserting that it was pointless to try to beat Class 1A. Shinso, a purple-haired student, challenged Bakugo's arrogance, reminding him that many students ended up in general studies due to their entrance exam scores. He declared his intent to take Bakugo's place in the hero course, framing it as a declaration of war before departing. Tetsu, a student from Class 1B, shouted at Bakugo, expressing his frustration and urging them not to embarrass their class during the sports festival. Bakugo left without responding, and Tetsu continued to voice his displeasure. As 2 weeks passed, Izuku and Class 1A focused on their studies and training. The day of the sports festival arrived, and the students gathered in a waiting room, all dressed in their P uniforms. Izuku encouraged everyone to be ready as they would soon be called out to the stadium. Todoroki approached Izuku, acknowledging their previous battle trial and admitting that he believed Izuku was stronger than he had initially thought. He declared his intention to beat him, to which Izuku responded with determination, stating that he planned to win as well. The scene shifted to the stadium, where Present Mike and Aizawa served as commentators. Present Mike excitedly announced the entrance of the first-year students, and classes 1A to 1K made their way to the center of the stadium, greeted by cheers from the audience. As Izuku walked alongside his classmates, he spotted familiar faces in the stands. Fubuki and his parents cheered him on, with Inko encouraging him to do his best. Hisashi waved proudly, ensuring that his family remained composed. Izuku's gaze then landed on the pro-heroes, and he paused when he saw his eldest sister, Tatsumaki, sitting a few seats away from All Might. All Might greeted her warmly, expressing his excitement for Izuku's first sports festival. She expressed her hesitation, avoiding All Might's gaze and looking away from Izuku. This saddened Izuku, who redirected his focus to the task ahead. Once all the students gathered at the center of the stadium, a stage appeared with Midnight, the R-rated hero, standing as this year's umpire. Midnight announced that it was time for a speech from the first year's representative, Izuku Midoriya. As Izuku walked toward the stage, Akiyama remarked on his role as the representative, while Kirishima noted that it made sense since Izuku had achieved first place in the entrance exams. Bakugo scoffed in response. On stage, Midnight handed Izuku a microphone. He tapped it a couple of times before speaking. He expressed his gratitude for being at UA and participating in the sports festival, acknowledging the excitement and nerves that came with it. He encouraged everyone to do their best and hoped the audience would enjoy the event. After handing the microphone back, the crowd cheered for him. Midnight praised Izuku's speech and then revealed the first event, an obstacle race. The rules were straightforward. Every student had to race around 4 kilometers and return, starting at a large metal gate that opened with 3 red lights on top. Midnight emphasized that students could use any means necessary to navigate the course, as long as they avoided excessive violence against fellow racers, which would lead to disqualification. As the students lined up at the gate, Izuku chose to stay back, anticipating the chaos that would ensue. The red lights turned yellow, accompanied by a beeping sound. Midnight called for the start, and the students at the front began pushing and shoving to get ahead. Izuku, having predicted this, took a running start and leaped into the air, using his psychokinesis to propel himself above the crowd, landing on the other side in an instant. Now in first place, Izuku deactivated his quirk and began running. His pace quickened until he suddenly stopped, confronted by several smaller versions of the zero-pointer robots from the entrance exams. One of the robots raised its fist, aiming for him. Izuku swiftly dodged and used his psychokinesis to manipulate one of its legs, causing it to slip and fall onto another robot. The robots began to topple over like a row of dominoes. Despite this, another robot was closing in on him. Izuku managed to evade its attack and glanced back, noticing other students catching up. Determined to maintain his lead, he propelled himself forward again. He soon encountered a canyon with large pillars connected by tightropes. Using his quirk, he skillfully navigated across the tightropes, reaching the end and continuing his run. Looking back, he saw that he was still ahead, but Bakugo and Todoroki were gaining on him. Bakugo shouted his determination not to lose to Izuku, while Todoroki followed closely behind. Ahead, Izuku spotted the finish line, but the dirt path was riddled with lumps that he recognized as landmines. He knew he had to use his quirk again to avoid coming in third place. Uraraka called out to him, using one for all throughout her body while activating her zero-gravity quirk. She propelled herself past Bakugo and Todoroki, stunning them both. Izuku grinned and used his psychokinesis to leap over the landmines, with Uraraka following suit. As she released her quirk, she began to slow down, allowing Izuku to take the lead. Uraraka aimed to use her quirk on him to slow him down, but Izuku dodged her hand. They both emerged from the tunnel, with Izuku crossing the finish line first. Present Mike announced that Izuku Midoriya was the winner of the obstacle race, followed closely by Ochako Uraraka in second place. As they caught their breath, Izuku and Uraraka shared a laugh. Izuku remarked that his idea had worked out well for her, to which Uraraka agreed, acknowledging his genius and noting how close she had come to beating him. They both smiled, enjoying the moment. Both Izuku and his classmates understood the importance of conserving their energy for the upcoming challenges. As they waited for all the first-year students from UA to cross the finish line, Midnight announced the arrival of the top 42 who would move on to the next event. The screen displayed the rankings, showcasing the names of the students in order. Midnight explained that although some might be disappointed for not making the cut, there were still opportunities to shine. She then revealed that the next event would be a cavalry battle, where participants would form teams of 2 to 4 in a horse and rider formation. The objective was to capture opponents' headbands while protecting their own. With a twist, each student had been assigned a point value based on their previous ranking. Uraraka realized that each team would have a different point value depending on its members, and Ishido confirmed this. Midnight, however, interrupted them, insisting on explaining the rules herself. She clarified that the lowest-ranked student was worth 5 points, while the first-place student was worth a staggering 10 million points. This revelation made Izuku feel the weight of everyone's gaze upon him. Midnight encouraged the students to use their quirks freely but warned against intentionally causing a team to fall, as that would lead to disqualification. With 15 minutes to form their teams, the contestants scrambled to find partners. Izuku attempted to approach others, but many avoided him, wary of the target he had become due to his high point value. Kirishima stepped forward, eager to team up with Izuku, who felt grateful for his friend's support. Akiyama and Uraraka soon joined them, although Uraraka mentioned that Ida had chosen to team with Todoroki instead. Izuku accepted this, and they quickly devised a strategy. Kirishima would take the front as their shield, Akiyama would cover their flank, Uraraka would ride, and Izuku would provide long-range support. As the time limit expired, the teams took their positions, anticipation building. Present Mick's voice rang out, signaling the start of the battle. Teams charged forward, and Uraraka called for action. However, they soon found themselves stuck, as the ground beneath them felt like mud. Izuku quickly used his quirk to lift his team out of the sticky situation, creating a barrier to protect them from incoming attacks. They managed to escape but soon faced another challenge when Mineta appeared, attempting to hinder their progress. With teamwork, Uraraka freed Izuku from the sticky ball that had trapped his foot, allowing them to continue their escape. As they regrouped, Bakugo charged at them, ready to attack, but Izuku's barrier protected Uraraka from the explosion. Akiyama took the opportunity to counterattack, sending Bakugo flying back. The explosive student was momentarily distracted when Monoma stole his headband, prompting Bakugo to pursue him in anger. Team Uraraka continued to evade their opponents until they encountered Team Todoroki. Todoroki declared his intent to take their headbands, and the tension between him and Uraraka escalated. With a command to Ida to advance, the battle was set to intensify. Uraraka called out to Izuku, ready for whatever came next. Barrier. Izuku sprang into action, quickly acting a psychic barrier just as Team Todoroki crashed against it. The strength of Izuku's barriers had proven formidable during the battle trial against Bakugo, and he felt confident in their durability. He turned to Kirishima, acknowledging the unconventional strategy. Kirishima understood the urgency, especially with less than a minute remaining. Akiyama chimed in, suggesting they had already secured victory. Uraraka celebrated their success in the cavalry battle, even as Team Todoroki continued their relentless attempts to breach Izuku's barrier with ice, rapid kicks, melee weapons, and electricity. Other teams joined the fray, but their efforts were in vain. The barrier remained unscathed. Present Mic announced the end of the cavalry battle, and the crowd erupted in cheers for the top 4 teams. Team Uraraka in first, Team Todoroki in second, Team Bakugo in third, and Team Shinso in fourth. As everyone dispersed for a lunch break, Todoroki approached Uraraka, asking to speak privately. She agreed, albeit with curiosity about his intentions. Once in a secluded area, Uraraka inquired about the reason for their conversation. Todoroki hesitated, recalling his thoughts during the USJ attack and how she had surpassed him and Bakugo in the obstacle race. He mentioned the whispers surrounding her impressive feat in the entrance exams, drawing a comparison to All Might's powers. Uraraka was taken aback by his blunt question about her parentage, which prompted her to stifle a laugh. She assured him that All Might was not her father and showed him a picture of her real parents, dispelling his doubts. Todoroki accepted her explanation but seemed troubled. Uraraka then posed a question of her own, noting the flames she had seen during the cavalry battle. He explained that his quirk was half cold, half hot, a combination of ice and fire, inherited from both his parents. Uraraka was fascinated, realizing they both had unique abilities. As their conversation deepened, Todoroki revealed the complicated nature of his family dynamics, including his father's obsession with surpassing All Might and the pressure it placed on him and his siblings. He shared the painful truth about his family, including the loss of his oldest brother and the emotional scars left by his father's actions. Uraraka listened intently, her concern for him growing. He expressed his determination to reject his father's fire quirk, wanting to prove he could succeed without it. He asked Uraraka to keep this information private, feeling it was a burden he had to bear alone. As he walked away, Uraraka stood in silence, processing the weight of his revelations. Later, she joined Izuku, Ida, Kirishima, and Akiyama for lunch, sharing what Todoroki had confided in her. Izuku understood the implications of Todoroki's struggles and felt it was a family matter they couldn't interfere with. Uraraka, still shaken by the conversation, appreciated Izuku's comforting gesture as he encouraged her not to worry too much. Uraraka couldn't help but blush as she smiled, feeling grateful for Midoriya's compliment. As they made their way back to the stadium, lunch break was coming to an end. Midoriya was internally panicking, realizing he had just called Uraraka pretty. Present Mic announced the return to the UA First Year's Sports Festival, sharing exciting news for those who had not succeeded in previous events. They would have a chance to compete in recreational events, serving as a warm-up before the final competition. He also introduced cheerleaders from the United States, who performed energetically. However, Present Mike was taken aback when he noticed the girls from Class 1A standing with blank expressions in cheerleader outfits. Midoriya rushed over, confused and concerned. Yaoyorozu explained that Mineta and Kaminari had tricked them into dressing up, and she felt foolish for falling for it, especially after using her quirk to create the outfits. Uraraka comforted her as Jiro expressed her frustration, while Hagakure suggested they embrace the situation and enjoy the uniforms, surprising Jiro. Azui complimented Hagakure's enthusiasm, but Akiyama urged caution. Midoriya, still serious, warned the girls to change back into their P uniforms, which they quickly did. Midnight then announced the highly anticipated final event, a tournament where the remaining 16 students would face off in one-on-one combat. She explained that they would determine the matchups by drawing lots, and the students would have time to prepare during the recreational games. Ojiro raised his hand to announce his withdrawal, citing his inability to remember anything from the cavalry battle and expressing his desire to earn his place. Shota echoed his sentiments, and when Tokoyami was asked about his decision, he chose to continue, determined to fight. With Ojiro and Shota withdrawn, Tetsu and Ibro were selected to take their places. The tournament bracket was displayed, revealing that Uraraka would face Hitoshi Shinso first. Shinso approached Uraraka, but Ojiro intervened, warning her not to speak, which puzzled her. As the recreational games commenced, Midoriya took a moment to walk around the stadium, contemplating potential opponents. He anticipated a semi-final match against Bakugo and wondered if Uraraka or Todoroki would be in the finals. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from a hallway and decided to investigate. As he approached, he peeked around the corner and was stunned to see Fubuki sharing a kiss with another woman. Caught off guard, Midoriya accidentally stumbled and fell, startling both women. Fubuki recognized him and expressed her surprise, apologizing for the unexpected revelation. Midoriya, embarrassed, covered his face with his hands as he got up. Fubuki sighed, acknowledging that this was not how she wanted him to find out about her relationship. She introduced her girlfriend, Shino Sosaki, who greeted Midoriya awkwardly. Midoriya introduced himself, still processing the situation. He learned that Fubuki and Sosaki had been dating for over a year, which shocked him. He questioned whether their parents knew, and Fubuki admitted she hadn't told them yet but planned to do so during the summer. Not exactly sure when it would happen, but Fubuki planned to introduce Shino to the family. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about it. Izuku expressed his happiness for Fubuki and assured her that he wouldn't tell anyone about her relationship with Ms. Sosaki. Fubuki thanked him, expressing her love, and they shared a warm hug. She encouraged Izuku to prepare for the tournament and aim for victory at the sports festival, reminding him of the achievements she and Tatsu had made at his age. With a determined spirit, Izuku ran off, leaving Fubuki to consider her own plans. Fubuki realized she needed to head home before her parents began to worry. Sosaki agreed, mentioning that she had to return to the others but promised to meet Fubuki later after the festival. They exchanged a brief, affectionate gesture before parting ways. Present Mike announced his gratitude to Cementos for creating the fighting ring, which was almost complete thanks to Cementos's quirk. Meanwhile, Uraraka stood a few feet away from a doorway, taking deep breaths to prepare herself for the tournament. Tashinori approached her, praising her progress and success in training for the sports festival. Uraraka thanked him, though she admitted to feeling nervous. Tashinori encouraged her to smile during challenging times, reminding her to instill hope in others. He transformed into his heroic form, giving her a thumbs up, and Uraraka felt a surge of determination. Present Mike then called for the first match, pitting Ochako Uraraka from Class 1A against Hitoshi Shinso from Class 1C. As the two entered the ring, they sized each other up. Present Mike explained the rules. Victory could be achieved by knocking an opponent out of the ring, rendering them unconscious, or forcing them to forfeit. He emphasized that while they could use their quirks freely, they must not endanger each other's lives, as that would lead to disqualification. Shinso taunted Uraraka, referencing a previous classmate's foolish decision to forfeit. This provoked Uraraka, who charged at him, only to find herself frozen in place. Realizing that Shinso's quirk was at play, she struggled internally, feeling her body move against her will. As she approached the edge of the ring, a dark doorway appeared behind her, filled with glowing eyes. In that moment, a surge of power coursed through her, allowing her to break free from Shinso's control. With renewed strength, Uraraka turned to face Shinso, who was shocked by her sudden recovery. She remained silent, not wanting to fall under his influence again. Shinso expressed his jealousy of her strong quirk and his frustrations about not being in the hero course. Uraraka charged at him, refusing to back down despite his attempts to provoke her. In a swift move, she used her quirk to make him weightless, sending him spinning before throwing him out of the ring. As Shinso fell to the ground, Midnight announced Uraraka's victory, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Uraraka looked at Shinso, noticing the disappointment in his eyes. She felt compelled to say something encouraging. She acknowledged his strong quirk and expressed her hope that he would train harder to improve. She shared her own journey of growth, explaining how she had developed her abilities through hard work. Shinso listened, moved by her words, especially as his classmates began to cheer for him and even some pro-heroes recognized the potential of his quirk. With a newfound determination, Shinso smiled at Uraraka, expressing his resolve to prove himself and become a hero, just as he had always dreamed. Uraraka felt a sense of pride in his decision, knowing that their paths as aspiring heroes were only just beginning. Uraraka expressed her support, but Shinso reminded her to be cautious. With only 20 students allowed per class, he hoped she wouldn't make it too easy for him, as he was counting on her to win for those with lesser quirks. Uraraka nodded in agreement. After the match, Uraraka visited Recovery Girl, Yue's elderly nurse, who tended to her broken fingers and bandaged them up. Once finished, Recovery Girl assured her that she was all better. Uraraka then shared with All Might that something strange had happened while she was under Shinso's control. She described how the doorway had darkened, and she saw 8 figures staring at her before feeling the power of One for All surge through her. All Might was intrigued and revealed that he had experienced something similar. He speculated that the figures might be remnants of the previous One for All users. Uraraka was amazed, realizing that their spirits could be part of the quirk. All Might noted that it was odd since he was the 8th user and still alive, suggesting that his essence had likely been part of One for All since he received it in his youth. Recovery Girl interrupted, informing them that the next match was about to begin. All Might encouraged Uraraka to watch, as the winner would be her next opponent. The second match featured Todoroki against Siro, ending with Todoroki encasing Siro in a giant block of ice. The third match was Ida vs. Hatsum, where Hatsum showcased her support items, impressing the officials from the Hero Support Department. Present Mic announced the fourth match, Momo Yaoyorozu vs. Kaya Akiyama. Yaoyorozu felt intimidated by the taller girl as they entered the ring. As the match began, Yaoyorozu created a shield and a metal pole, while Akiyama took a fighting stance. Akiyama charged, and Yaoyorozu went on the defensive, blocking a punch with her shield. However, she struggled to maintain her footing as Akiyama continued to attack. When Akiyama disarmed her, Yaoyorozu quickly created a second shield to defend against Akiyama's powerful punches. Despite her efforts, she was pushed back and ultimately fell out of bounds. Midnight announced Akiyama as the winner, leaving Yaoyorozu devastated by her loss. Akiyama reached out to her, trying to comfort her as she helped Yaoyorozu back to her feet. Present Mic then declared the fifth match, Denki Kaminari vs. Izuku Midoriya. Kaminari expressed doubt about winning but decided to give it his all, unleashing a powerful electric attack. However, Izuku protected himself with a psychokinetic bubble, taking no damage. The crowd watched in confusion as Kaminari appeared dazed, giving a thumbs up while saying yay. Midnight announced that Kaminari was incapacitated by his own quirk, declaring Izuku the winner. Izuku assisted the stunned Kaminari to Recovery Girl. The sixth match featured Shiozaki against Ishido, where Ishido managed to escape Shiozaki's vines but was ultimately knocked out of bounds. The seventh match was a fierce battle between Kirishima and Tetsu, resulting in a draw as they both knocked each other out cold. Midnight announced that they would determine a winner later. The eighth match saw Tokoyami face Bakugu, who overpowered him, forcing Tokoyami to forfeit. Present Mike concluded the first rounds and announced a break. After the break, Kirishima and Tetsu competed in arm wrestling to break the tie, with Kirishima emerging victorious. As Uraraka made her way to her next match, she unexpectedly encountered Endeavor, the number 3 hero. He acknowledged her progress in the sports festival and praised her quirk, noting her ability to control gravity and the impressive wind pressures she created with just a flick of her fingers. Endeavor remarked that Uraraka's quirk bore a resemblance to All Might's in terms of raw power. Uraraka acknowledged this, feeling a bit awkward as she prepared to leave for her next match. Endeavor then stated that his son, Shoto, had a responsibility to surpass both All Might and Terrible Tornado. This made Uraraka pause, as Endeavor continued to express his expectations for Shoto's match against her, urging her to give it her all and make him utilize his fire. After Endeavor finished speaking, Uraraka called out to him, prompting him to stop. She asserted that she was not All Might and that Todoroki was not Endeavor. With that, she walked away, leaving Endeavor with a glare. Present Mike announced the start of the second rounds, introducing the match between Ochako Uraraka and Shoto Todoroki. As the two competitors faced each other in the ring, Present Mike signaled the beginning of the match. Todoroki quickly launched waves of ice toward Uraraka, who countered by using 100% of One for All in a single finger flick, creating powerful wind pressures that shattered the ice. The force sent Todoroki back, and he barely managed to create a wall of ice to prevent himself from falling out of the ring. Uraraka winced as she broke another finger but had no time to dwell on it, as Todoroki sent another wave of ice. She repeated her earlier move, breaking yet another finger in the process. Izuku observed the battle closely, noting that Todoroki was using less power than he had against Siro, likely trying to conserve energy after overexerting himself earlier. Todoroki declared that if Uraraka wanted to make this an endurance match, he would end it quickly. He sent another wave of ice, which Uraraka shattered with her wind pressure. Internally, she lamented the state of her fingers, realizing they were all broken. As Todoroki began to close the distance, he created ice with his feet, prompting Uraraka to use her left hand to shatter it. However, Todoroki leaped into the air, aiming directly for her. Determined to make him weightless, Uraraka jumped after him, stretching out her hand. Although Todoroki twisted to evade her, she managed to touch him with her other hand, causing him to float. While she felt a sense of victory, it was tempered by the realization that Todoroki had not fought at his full strength, which felt unfair to her. With her hands together, Uraraka deactivated her quirk, allowing Todoroki to fall to the ground with a grunt. In response, he placed his hand on the floor and sent another wave of ice toward her. Uraraka dodged, but her foot became trapped in the ice. Quickly, she used another finger to create wind pressure, shattering the ice and freeing herself. Todoroki questioned why she had let him go when she could have won by making him float. Uraraka explained that he wasn't fighting at full strength, which frustrated him. As he sent another wave of ice, she shattered it once more, but Todoroki noticed that all her fingers were now broken. He believed she had reached her limit, only to be surprised when she used one of her already broken fingers to shatter his ice again. Uraraka insisted that Todoroki was freezing and that quirks could be exhausting, just like any workout. She urged him to use his fire, shocking him with her words. She expressed that everyone had been giving their all in the sports festival, but he was holding back. She challenged him to fight her with everything he had. Todoroki, frustrated, questioned her motives, suspecting that Endeavor had influenced her. He declared that he would end the match right then. The two charged at each other, with Uraraka ducking and landing a punch in Todoroki's gut. He retaliated by freezing her upper left arm before being sent flying back. Uraraka cried out in pain as Todoroki hit the ground hard but quickly got back up. The match continued with Todoroki's ice becoming weaker as Uraraka skillfully dodged, trying to minimize her injuries. He attempted another ice wave, which she shattered again. Todoroki demanded to know why she was pushing herself so hard for the match. Uraraka passionately declared that she wanted to live up to her goal of becoming a hero. As she charged toward him, Todoroki dodged her attack. Uraraka admitted that she didn't fully understand his situation at home but insisted that using only half of his strength to spite his father would not lead to victory. She urged him to give it his all, or he would simply be letting her win. With that, she landed a punch on Todoroki's face, sending him flying. As Todoroki lay on the ground, memories flooded his mind. He slowly rose to one knee, stating that he refused to use his father's fire. Uraraka countered that it wasn't his father's fire but his own quirk. She reminded him of a childhood memory of his mother encouraging him to be the hero he wanted to be. After a moment, flames erupted from Todoroki's left side, filling the stadium with heat. Todoroki acknowledged Uraraka's determination to help her opponent, expressing his desire to be a hero as well. Despite the injuries and the challenging situation, Uraraka and Izuku smiled at the sight of Todoroki's flames. Todoroki questioned why Uraraka was smiling, considering her injuries and the odds against her, suggesting that she must be crazy. Don't blame him for what happens next. He charged up his ice and fire, while Uraraka did the same, channeling one for all throughout her body. Cementos and Midnight prepared to use their quirks, aware that Uraraka's body wouldn't withstand any more damage if they clashed. Todoroki sent a massive wave of ice toward Uraraka, who quickly jumped onto it. She began running along the ice, inching closer to her classmate. She thought about timing her move perfectly, urging Todoroki to come at her with his full power. Todoroki acknowledged her with gratitude before firing a huge blast of flames. Cementos quickly created concrete pillars between them, resulting in a massive explosion that rocked the stadium. The crowd screamed and shielded their eyes as the wind pressure swept through the audience. Present Mike exclaimed that it was quite the blast but struggled to see through the dust. As it cleared, Todoroki was still standing, though the left side of his pea shirt had been burnt off. However, Uraraka was nowhere to be found, leaving everyone puzzled about her whereabouts. Uraraka had used her zero gravity on herself, leaping high just as Cementos's pillar rose, dodging the blast. As her normal weight returned, she calculated her fall, heading straight down toward Todoroki. The audience gasped in shock as they saw her descending like a missile. Todoroki, exhausted, raised an arm to attack but was too slow. Uraraka clenched her fist and unleashed a powerful punch, knocking Todoroki out of the ring and bouncing off him to land safely inside. Midnight announced that Shoto Todoroki was out of bounds, declaring Ochako Uraraka the winner. The crowd cheered for her, but she couldn't hear them, focused instead on the pain from her injuries. She was immediately taken to Recovery Girl due to her broken legs and arm. Recovery Girl assessed her injuries and noted the severity, stating that she would need to remove the fragments and heal her. She expressed concern about Uraraka's reckless actions. Suddenly, the door burst open as Izuku, Ida, Kirishima, Akiyama, Azui, and Mineta entered. Izuku asked if she was okay, and Kirishima remarked on the seriousness of her injuries. Uraraka reassured them, wondering why they weren't watching the matches. Ida explained that they had paused for repairs due to the damage. Mineta, trying to lighten the mood, commented on her being impressive but was quickly reprimanded by Azui. Akiyama punched Mineta for his inappropriate remarks, and Recovery Girl demanded silence so she could focus on surgery. Uraraka, concerned about her injuries, caught the attention of All Might and Recovery Girl. She asked if she would be able to continue, to which Toshinori sighed and explained that even after healing, she likely wouldn't have the strength to keep going. Although she had won, it was decided that Todoroki would advance. Uraraka expressed her regret for not fulfilling her promise to show the world her determination, but Toshinori reassured her that there was no need to apologize. He praised her for her actions during the match, emphasizing that true heroism often involves taking risks. Present Mike announced that the ring had been repaired and the second rounds were ready to continue, introducing the next match, Tenya Ida vs. Kaya Akiyama. Akiyama asked if there were any hard feelings, and Ida responded with a smile, indicating there were none. Present Mike signaled the start of the match, and Ida immediately ran circles around Akiyama, who remained on guard. When he attacked, Akiyama blocked his kick but attempted to counter with a punch. Ida's agility allowed him to dodge, and he slid across the ring with Akiyama in pursuit. She attempted a kick, But Ida evaded and retaliated with a kick of his own, striking Akiyama in the head. However, she anticipated this and grabbed his leg, slamming him to the floor multiple times before throwing him toward the edge of the ring. Ida managed to stop himself just in time. Determined, he activated his Recipro Burst, running faster than ever and pushing Akiyama toward the edge of the ring. Despite her size, he was succeeding until Akiyama elbowed him in the face, breaking his glasses and causing him to bleed. As they both fell, Akiyama quickly got up and grabbed Ida in a chokehold. He struggled to escape but realized he was losing consciousness and yielded. Midnight announced that Tenya Ida forfeited, declaring Kaya Akiyama the winner. The crowd cheered as Akiyama released him, apologizing for his broken glasses. Ida reassured her that it was fine, as he had spares, and they shook hands, affirming there were no hard feelings. Kirishima and Tetsu admired their camaraderie, shedding tears of joy. Present Mike announced that they were halfway through the second rounds, introducing the next match between Izuku Midoriya and Ibara Shiozaki, as the two green-haired teens entered the ring. He announced, prompting Shiozaki to immediately direct her energy towards Izuku. The young Esper was preparing to create a barrier, but Shiozaki ensnared him with her vine-like hair before he could react. Anticipating his escape attempt, Shiozaki attempted to throw Izuku out of bounds, but she suddenly froze. Izuku, suspended midair in her vines, utilized his psychokinesis to immobilize Shiozaki, compelling her to return him to the ring. Once back in the arena, Izuku formed a barrier around himself, severing the vines that had held him captive. Shiozaki winced in discomfort as the hair was part of her body. Undeterred, she sent more energy towards Izuku, but he was prepared, using his powers to paralyze her once more. He forced Shiozaki to her knees, and she groaned under the weight of his psychokinesis, feeling as though gravity had intensified around her. Izuku thought to himself that he hoped she would forfeit, not wanting to overexert his quirk. Shiozaki held on longer than he anticipated, continuing to fight for several minutes. This prompted Izuku to increase his power, ultimately forcing Shiozaki to fall flat on her stomach. She finally relented, declaring her surrender. Midnight announced that Ibara Shiozaki had forfeited, declaring Izuku Midoriya the winner. The crowd erupted in cheers as Izuku released his quirk, offering his hand to Shiozaki, who reluctantly accepted as he helped her to her feet. The next match was set to begin between Kirishima and Bakugo, following the same trajectory as in the original story, with Kirishima putting up a good fight but ultimately losing due to his quirk being less suited for prolonged battles. Present Mike expressed excitement for the semifinals, announcing the match between Shoto Todoroki and Kaya Akiyama. The two competitors stared each other down before the match commenced. Todoroki unleashed a wave of ice towards Akiyama, who responded with a fierce war cry, shattering the ice with rapid punches as she advanced toward him. As Akiyama closed the distance, she aimed a punch at Todoroki, but he skillfully slid away on a sheet of ice. Undeterred, she pursued him, determined to break the ice and halt his movement. Akiyama then dug into the ring, tearing out a large chunk and hurling it at Todoroki. He quickly acted a wall of ice to block the projectile, resulting in a powerful collision that sent him tumbling to the ground. Just as Todoroki regained his footing, he saw Akiyama charging toward him. He barely managed to step back before her fist struck his face, causing blood to trickle from his nostrils as he fell backward. In a last-ditch effort, he grasped Akiyama's wrist, encasing her in ice as he hit the ground. Akiyama shivered, nearly completely encased in ice, as Todoroki lay on the floor. Midnight hesitated to announce Todoroki's victory, noticing Akiyama using all her strength to crack the ice. With determination, Todoroki extended his left arm and unleashed flames, melting the ice and propelling Akiyama out of the ring. Midnight declared that Kaya Akiyama was out of bounds, and Shoto Todoroki advanced to the finals, prompting cheers from the crowd. Akiyama returned to the stands, where her classmates awaited her. She was surprised to see Kirishima approach her with stars in his eyes. He exclaimed that her match had been incredible, to which Akiyama responded, asking him not to scream in her face. Kirishima apologized, expressing admiration for her performance. Akiyama, still processing the compliment, thanked him as she took a seat beside him. Present Mic announced the next semi-final match, featuring Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. As they entered the ring, All Might observed that his younger brother was performing admirably in the sports festival, while Terrible Tornado dismissed the comment, focusing instead on Bakugo. All Might was taken aback to learn that Bakugo had once bullied Izuku during their childhood, recalling memories of Izuku's struggles. In a flashback, Tatsumaki, at 17, had taken her younger brother to the park, only to prevent him from approaching Bakugo and his friends. She remembered another painful moment when she found Izuku, bruised and crying, and vowed to protect him from the bullying he faced. The narrative continued to unfold, highlighting the challenges and growth of the characters as they faced their battles in the tournament. Teen Fubuki expressed concern for her sister, urging her not to confront Bakugo. Young Tatsumaki, with a fierce determination in her eyes, insisted that no one could stop her. Fubuki knew she couldn't intervene, so she reluctantly agreed to take Izuku home while Tatsumaki handled her business. The next day, Izuku entered his classroom and found Bakugo sitting in his seat, visibly upset and trying to hold back tears. Terrible Tornado observed the impending confrontation, her gaze fixed on Bakugo. She confidently stated that Izuku would come out on top, which startled All Might, who chose to remain silent and focus on the match. Present Mic announced the start of the match, and Bakugo immediately charged forward, using his explosions to boost his speed. He yelled fiercely, aiming an explosion at Izuku, who skillfully blocked it with a psychic barrier. Bakugo relentlessly bombarded the barrier with a series of explosions, but Izuku maintained his defense for several minutes before Bakugo paused, jumping back. Bakugo challenged Izuku, demanding he stop hiding behind the barrier and fight him directly. Izuku calmly replied that it wasn't his fault Bakugo was struggling. Bakugo was infuriated, insisting that Izuku was underestimating him. The explosive blonde continued his assault, but despite his efforts, he made no progress in breaking through Izuku's defense. As the match wore on, Bakugo's frustration grew. He demanded Izuku fight back, but Izuku explained that he wanted to see Bakugo grow stronger first. He encouraged Bakugo to unleash his most powerful explosion, surprising him with his confidence. Bakugo, feeling challenged, accepted the call to action and prepared for his next move. After nearly half an hour of battling, Bakugo was visibly exhausted. Izuku taunted him, urging him to come at him with everything he had. Bakugo, determined, took to the air, using his explosions to create a swirling tornado of flames as he launched his ultimate. With a mighty shout, Bakugo unleashed his howitzer impact, and the stadium erupted in a massive explosion. As the smoke cleared, Bakugo was revealed on his knees, panting heavily, while Izuku floated just above the ground, having barely managed to stay in the ring. Izuku acknowledged Bakugo's impressive strength, noting that he had broken through his barrier. However, Bakugo, still frustrated, accused Izuku of not using his full strength and feeling superior to him. He expressed his anger about the unfairness of their situation, feeling overshadowed despite his years of training. Izuku, feeling sympathetic, prepared to end the match. He surrounded Bakugo in a green aura and gently threw him out of the ring. Midnight announced Bakugo's defeat, and the audience erupted in cheers for Izuku. Fubuki and Tatsumaki exchanged smug glances, satisfied that Bakugo had faced consequences for his past behavior. Due to the damage caused during the match, the finals were postponed for repairs. Present Mic then announced the highly anticipated final showdown between Izuku and Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor. The audience buzzed with excitement, discussing the connection between Izuku and the Psychic Sisters. Izuku urged Todoroki to use his fire in their battle, while Todoroki admitted his initial reluctance but acknowledged that he had grown to appreciate his powers thanks to Uraraka's encouragement. He recognized Izuku's strength and vowed to give it his all. As the match began, Todoroki summoned ice and fire, while Izuku enveloped himself in a green psychic aura. When Todoroki launched a wave of ice, Izuku created a barrier to protect himself. The ice encased him, but he quickly broke free, soaring into the air, leaving the spectators in awe. When did Midoriya learn how to fly? the red-haired teen exclaimed as Todoroki unleashed a blast of fire toward Izuku, who skillfully dodged and moved closer to the peppermint-haired teen. The two engaged in a fierce back-and-forth for several minutes, with Todoroki alternating between ice and fire attacks while Izuku adeptly evaded and blocked them using his psychokinesis. Todoroki then summoned a massive wave of ice, but Izuku pushed through it. Creating a large ice wall behind him, Todoroki gathered all the power he had left in his left side and unleashed a tremendous inferno aimed at Izuku. Just a few feet away, Izuku generated a psychokinetic barrier to shield himself from the blast. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the arena, and the crowd gasped as smoke enveloped the ring. After a moment, the smoke cleared, revealing an unconscious Todoroki outside the ring and a weary, dust-covered Izuku still standing within it. Midnight announced that Shoto Todoroki was out of bounds, declaring Izuku Midoriya the winner of the first year's sports festival. The crowd erupted in cheers, louder than ever before. Time passed as Todoroki was taken to Recovery Girl, regaining consciousness within minutes. All the first-year students gathered at the center of the stadium as Midnight tapped her microphone. She announced that all events of the sports festival had concluded and it was time to relax and enjoy the awards ceremony, prompting cheers and fireworks from the audience. A podium rose from the floor behind Midnight, revealing the winners of the sports festival, Izuku in first place, Todoroki in second, and Akiyama and Bakugo sharing third place. Bakugo thrashed about in frustration, upset over losing to Izuku and feeling that he had held back during their match. Midnight then began distributing the awards, stating that there was only one person worthy of doing so. The audience heard a familiar laugh echoing from the top of the stadium. All Might announced his arrival, jumping down into the stadium to the crowd's excitement. Midnight handed All Might the medals as he approached Akiyama, placing a bronze medal around her neck. He congratulated her for showing great strength. Akiyama smiled and thanked him. Next, he addressed Bakugo, acknowledging his versatility but suggesting he work on his anger issues as he placed a bronze medal around the blonde's neck. All Might then congratulated Todoroki, giving him the silver medal and praising his performance while hinting that he should utilize his fire abilities more often. Todoroki responded with a stoic acknowledgement. Finally, All Might congratulated Izuku, handing him the golden medal. He noted that while Izuku had held back, it was a strategic choice to conserve stamina, and he expressed his admiration for Izuku's strength and versatility, especially when he had flown. Izuku thanked All Might with a smile. All Might addressed the crowd, encouraging the first-year students to reflect on their experiences during the festival and how they had challenged each other, learned, and moved closer to their goals of becoming heroes. He declared that the next generation of heroes was proving to be the most promising yet and invited everyone to join him in a rallying cry of Plus Ultra. With that, the UA Sports Festival officially concluded, and everyone began to head home. Izuku reunited with his parents and sister Fubuki, who pulled him into a tight embrace. His mother exclaimed her pride, while his father intervened to let him breathe. Hisashi expressed how proud they were of Izuku and announced they would celebrate by taking him out for dinner. Izuku was thrilled but then inquired about his sister Tatsu's absence. Inko explained that Tatsu had a case to handle, reminding them that a hero's job is never done. Izuku felt a pang of disappointment but was encouraged by his father to focus on the celebration. As the Midoriya family headed home, they shared in the joy of Izuku's victory. After the sports festival, the first-year students were given 2 days off from school. On his way to UA, Izuku rode the train, feeling overwhelmed by the recognition he received as the first-place winner. Upon reaching his stop, he walked to UA under an umbrella on a rainy day. Ida, running in a raincoat, called out to Izuku, urging him to hurry as they were close to being late. Izuku pointed out that they were actually 5 minutes early, but Ida insisted on arriving at least 10 minutes before class. The two rushed into the school together. As they entered, Izuku expressed his condolences to Ida regarding what had happened with Ingenium. Ida thanked him for his kind words. But there was no need for concern. He walked away with a smile, leaving Izuku looking after him with worry. Later, the students of Class 1A settled at their desks, buzzing with excitement about the attention they received from civilians during the sports festival. Their chatter quieted when Aizawa, now fully recovered, entered the classroom. Azui expressed her relief at Aizawa's recovery, and he explained that Recovery Girl had been quite thorough with his treatment. He was pleased that Hellish Blizzard had stepped in during his absence. Aizawa then announced that they would have a significant class on hero informatics, which piqued the students' curiosity, some wondering if it might involve a pop quiz. Aizawa informed them that they needed to choose code names, signaling the start of a fun activity. The class erupted in cheers, prompting Aizawa to glare at them until they settled down. He reminded them that this was connected to the pro-hero draft picks he had mentioned at the end of the sports festival. Typically, students didn't need to worry about the draft until their second or third year, but their class was different. By extending offers to first years, pros were investing in their potential, though any offers could be rescinded if interest waned before graduation. Hagakure pointed out that they would still need to prove themselves after being recruited, to which Aizawa confirmed. He then displayed the totals of offers received by each student on the screen. Midoriya had received 4,316 offers, Todoroki had 4,123, and Bakugo had 3,556, while the others had fewer, with Akiyama at 511 and Tokoyami at Aizawa noted that this year, all the attention was on the top 3. Regardless of the offers, everyone would be interning with pros, even those without offers. They had already faced real villains during the attack at the USJ facility, but observing pros in action would be invaluable. Kirishima excitedly pointed out that they needed hero names, and Uraraka agreed that things were getting more exciting. Aizawa cautioned them that while the names might be temporary, they should take the task seriously. Midnight then entered the classroom, interrupting Aizawa and emphasizing the importance of choosing a good codename, as she would have the final say. Aizawa handed out erasable markers and small white boards to the students, who passed them around. After a few moments, Midnight encouraged the students to present their hero names. Aoyama went first, introducing his name as I Cannot Stop Twinkling, which surprised the class when Midnight approved it, albeit shortening it to Can't Stop Twinkling. Ashido followed with Alien Queen, but Midnight disapproved due to the association with the Alien movies. Ashido felt disappointed as she returned to her seat, brainstorming a new name. Azui then presented Froppy, which Midnight approved, leading to cheers from the class. Kirishima introduced himself as Red Riot, Jiro as Earphone Jack, Shoji as Tentacle, Siro as Cellophane, Ojiro as Tailman, Akiyama as Tank Top Girl. Ashido returned with Pinky, Kaminari as Charge Bolt, and Hagakure as Invisible Girl. Midnight praised their choices and encouraged the next student to step up. Yayorozu presented her name, Kriati. Todoroki struggled to come up with a name and simply wrote down Shoto. Tokoyami followed with Tsukuyami. Mineta chose Grape Juice. Koda introduced himself as Anima, and Bakugo declared his name as King Explosion Murder, which Midnight did not approve of despite Bakugo's protests. Uraraka then presented her name, Uravity. All that remained were Bakugo, Ida, and Midoriya. Ida stared at his whiteboard, uncertain of what to write, as memories from 2 days prior flooded his mind. In a flashback, Ida recalled the night of the sports festival when he had rushed to the hospital after receiving a call about his brother's hospitalization due to an attack by the hero killer. He hurried through the halls of Hosu General Hospital, despite being told not to, desperate to see Tensei. Upon reaching his brother's room, he found their mother waiting outside. Ida called out to her, and she urged him to keep his voice down and wear a mask. The doctor informed them that Tensei was in and out of consciousness but had narrowly survived. As Tensei slowly opened his eyes, he weakly acknowledged Ida, who rushed to his side, tears streaming down his face. Tensei expressed his regret for not being the role model he wished to be, feeling he had failed his younger brother. Fast forward to the following night, when Ida visited Tensei again. He was surprised to find Hellish Blizzard sitting beside his brother. She explained that she had come to discuss important matters with Tensei, who revealed to Ida that he had suffered spinal damage and could not feel his legs. Ida's eyes widened in shock as he processed the news. Tensei confirmed that the hero ingenium was finished, leaving Ida in disbelief. He couldn't accept that his brother, who had inspired so many, could be gone. Tensei explained that with their parents busy with the company and his own injuries, he wanted Hellish Blizzard to take over the Ingenium agency until Ida graduated and became a pro-hero. Hellish Blizzard assured Ida that she would return the agency to him once he was ready. Tensei asked Ida to carry on his name, which weighed heavily on him. In the classroom, Ida presented his hero name, Ingenium, which Midnight approved. Midnight then turned to Izuku, asking if he was ready. Izuku walked to the front, revealing his chosen codename, the psychic hero, Roaring Hurricane. The class buzzed with excitement, noting the similarities to the codenames of his sisters. Midnight commented on the connection between the three siblings, just as Bakugo announced his name, Lord Explosion Murder, which Midnight disapproved of, stating it was too similar to his previous idea. Aizawa then shifted the focus to the upcoming internships, explaining that they would last for 1 week. He held up a list of hero agencies, mentioning that around 40 had agreed to take interns from their class, each with different specialties. Midnight encouraged the students to think carefully about their choices, using 13 as an example of someone who would prioritize rescue over combat. As the students received their lists, Aizawa reminded them to submit their choices before the weekend. Siro expressed concern about the short time frame, but Aizawa urged them to start immediately before dismissing the class. Izuku scanned the extensive list of hero agencies, feeling overwhelmed by the options. He searched for Hellish Blizzard, knowing she would be a good mentor, especially since he was still learning to control his psychokinesis quirk. However, he was disappointed not to find Terrible Tornado on the list, wishing his eldest sister had recognized him after the sports festival. Uraraka's voice broke his concentration as she called out to him, startling him. After a brief exchange, Izuku revealed he would be interning with Hellish Blizzard. Uraraka was surprised but understood the connection due to their shared quirk. She mentioned considering Gunhead for her internship to improve her combat skills. Kirishima chimed in, excited about his own plans to intern with his sister, Captain Mizuki, while Akiyama announced he would join Tank Top Master's agency. As they discussed their choices, Ida approached Izuku, announcing he would also be interning with Hellish Blizzard. Uraraka expressed excitement about them interning together, but Izuku was curious about Ida's reasoning. Ida praised Hellish Blizzard as an excellent substitute teacher and hero, but Izuku sensed there was more to it, recalling Fubuki's mention of the agency's transition. Despite his suspicions, Izuku smiled and agreed that they would both learn a lot. As the group prepared to leave the classroom, All Might suddenly appeared, startling them with his dramatic entrance. He called out to Uraraka, requesting a moment to speak with her privately. Uraraka agreed and bid her friends farewell as she followed All Might to a secluded hallway. There, All Might revealed that he had a last-minute internship offer for her from Gran Torino, a former UA teacher and a close friend of his predecessor, who also knew about One for All. Uraraka was amazed to learn that others were aware of the secret behind her mentor's power. But why did he make an offer to you? Uraraka felt a wave of concern wash over her as she noticed the number 1 hero trembling with fear. All Might reassured her, stating that while it was his duty to train her, since she had received an offer from Gran Torino, she should take the opportunity to learn from him. Uraraka's worry deepened as All Might emphasized that she should be very concerned. Gran Torino would not go easy on her. A few days later, the day of their internships arrived, and Uraraka, along with Aizawa, made her way to Gran Torino's agency. Upon arriving, she found it was less of an agency and more of a small, run-down apartment complex. Hesitant, she knocked on the door, unsure if she had the right place. When there was no answer, she knocked again, and the door creaked open slightly. Uraraka introduced herself, but there was no response. As she pushed the door open, she let out a startled scream upon seeing an elderly man lying on the floor. Gran Torino lifted his head and assured her he was alive, explaining that he had spilled ketchup while carrying sausages to the microwave. Uraraka sighed in relief, realizing the situation was not as dire as it seemed. Gran Torino then asked who she was, and Uraraka repeated her name, raising her voice slightly, thinking he might be hard of hearing. However, he seemed confused and sat down on the floor, claiming he needed food. Uraraka, unsure of how to respond, excused herself to make a quick call to All Might about Gran Torino's state of mind. Gran Torino, rummaging through her case where her costume was stored, challenged her to come at him with one for all. He expressed his interest in seeing how she could handle it, noting that young heroes had impressive costumes. Surprised by his sudden shift in demeanor, Uraraka questioned if it was a prank. Gran Torino then began leaping around the room with remarkable speed, landing right next to her. He acknowledged that it was a sort of prank but insisted that playtime was over. He had observed her use of one for all during the sports festival and believed she had a good grasp of it, but he felt she could use more training. With a confident grin, he urged her to hurry and put on her costume. Uraraka, feeling intimidated but determined, grabbed her case and rushed into another room to change. Meanwhile, Izuku and Ida arrived at their destination, the former Ingenium Agency, now known as the Hosu District Hellish Blizzard Agency. They approached the receptionist, who notified Hellish Blizzard of their arrival. After a brief wait, an elevator opened, revealing the psychic woman. She welcomed them and inquired about their trip to Hosu. Izuku replied that it was fine, while Ida expressed gratitude for the opportunity with a respectful bow. Hellish Blizzard led them to the 7th floor, where they entered a room filled with sidekicks from both agencies. She introduced Izuku and Ida as her interns, and the sidekicks approached them, introducing themselves and shaking hands. Hellish Blizzard then reminded everyone to return to work, emphasizing their duties as heroes. She turned her attention back to the interns and explained that she had initially planned to train only Izuku, but since Roaring Hurricane was also present, she devised a training exercise. Roaring Hurricane would use her quirk to hurl various objects in the training room towards Ingenium, who would practice dodging them. Hellish Blizzard instructed Roaring Hurricane to ensure the objects did not damage the training room. Both interns responded affirmatively, and Hellish Blizzard smiled before leaving to attend to paperwork. With the room now quiet, Ingenium expressed his excitement for the training ahead. The training session commenced with Midoriya and Ingenium in the training room. Midoriya, using his psychokinesis, surrounded various objects in a green aura and sent them flying toward Ingenium. The armored hero skillfully dodged the projectiles while moving around the room, ensuring that none of the items struck the walls, floor, or ceiling. Meanwhile, Kirishima, known as Red Riot, arrived at the Captain Mizuki agency. Captain Mizuki greeted him enthusiastically, embracing him in a warm hug. She expressed her joy at having her younger brother interning with her, and Red Riot reciprocated her excitement. Unlike Fubuki, Captain Mizuki managed a smaller agency with only a dozen sidekicks. She quickly led Red Riot to the workout room, encouraging him to train hard. At the Tank Top Master Agency, Akiyama, also known as Tank Top Girl, received a warm welcome from Tank Top Master, who praised her performance in the UA Sports Festival. She felt honored to be there and was eager to begin her training, which started with a patrol. Meanwhile, Uraraka trained with Gran Torino, who was demonstrating his agility. Uraraka utilized one for all full cowling at 5%, managing to land a few hits on the seasoned hero, impressing him with her speed and skill. After an hour of intense training, Izuku and Ingenium were exhausted. Ingenium had been hit by numerous objects, while Izuku had continuously used his quirk. Hellish Blizzard entered the training room, noting their fatigue and suggesting it was time for lunch. The two teens happily followed her to the break room for a meal. The training regimen continued for the next few days, with Fubuki alternating between training sessions and breaks until nightfall. On the third day, she decided to give Izuku and Ingenium a rest. As night fell, she gathered them at the agency entrance, announcing that they would be going on patrol. After about 20 minutes, the scene shifted to a bullet train carrying Uraraka and Gran Torino. They were traveling through Hosu, with Gran Torino planning to take Uraraka to Shibuya, where the crime rate was higher. Uraraka expressed her concerns about patrolling at night, but Gran Torino assured her that it would be exciting. Suddenly, the train made an emergency stop, and a hero crashed into the side, creating a large hole. An injured hero struggled to get back up when a tall, lanky creature with 4 eyes and an exposed brain appeared, overpowering him. Uraraka froze, recognizing the creature's resemblance to the Nomo from the previous attack. Gran Torino instructed her to stay put before leaping out to confront the creature. As they fell into the city below, Uraraka watched in horror as fire and smoke rose in the distance. She clenched her fists, worried about what was happening in Hosu and concerned for Izuku and Ingenium's safety. Meanwhile, Izuku, Ingenium, and Fubuki noticed the smoke and fire from afar. Fubuki ordered them to follow her as they rushed toward the chaos. Roaring hurricane levitated above the crowd, guiding them through the panicking people. They soon encountered two Nomas, one resembling the previous attack but without eyes, and another with yellow skin and dragon-like wings. Pro-heroes were struggling to contain the situation, with Manuel attempting to extinguish the flames. Uraraka arrived at the scene, calling out to her friends. Fubuki was surprised to see her and inquired about her presence. Uraraka explained the situation with Gran Torino and the Nomu. She then realized that Ingenium was missing and began searching for him, while Roaring Hurricane and Fubuki prepared to confront the Nomus. Fubuki instructed Uraraka to look for Ingenium, while Roaring Hurricane warned her to check dark alleyways, suspecting that Ingenium might be pursuing the hero killer. Uraraka nodded and dashed off, using her enhanced speed, while Fubuki and Izuku focused on the battle ahead. Uraraka took action, kicking Stain in the face and sending him flying away from Ida, who lay on the ground. She stood protectively between her friend and the hero killer, her heart racing. Uraraka called out to Ida, concerned for his well-being. Ida, struggling to move, explained that Stain's attack had left him paralyzed. Uraraka noticed the pro-hero native slumped against a wall, complicating her situation. If it were just Ida, she could carry him to safety, but leaving native behind was not an option. Ida urged Uraraka not to interfere, insisting that it was not her fight. Uraraka, however, argued that it was indeed her business, as both he and native were in danger. She understood the risks of being a hero, and with determination, she prepared to confront Stain. As Uraraka charged at Stain, he swung his blade toward her. Using her quirk, she made herself weightless, ducking between his legs and positioning herself behind him. Stain turned around, swinging again, but Uraraka leaped into the air, evading him. She then activated her quirk, coming down with a powerful punch that connected with Stain's head, avoiding any serious injury. Meanwhile, Izuku and Fubuki had subdued the Nomus, allowing the police to arrive and take control of the situation. Roaring Hurricane informed Fubuki that he had received a message from Uraraka, prompting them to rush to her location. Back with Uraraka, she continued to hold her ground against Stain, using her abilities to dodge and counterattack. Stain, frustrated, managed to land a small cut on her, which she initially did not notice. However, as he liked the drop of blood from his knife, Uraraka felt her strength wane, collapsing to the ground. Stain acknowledged her speed and resilience, noting that she had lasted longer than many heroes. He declared that he would spare her life, unlike the others. Uraraka, horrified, pleaded with him not to harm Ida, who was still in danger. Just then, Izuku and Fubuki arrived, their combined powers lifting Stain off the ground and forcing him to drop his weapons. Stain recognized Fubuki, expressing his disdain for her and accusing her of being a false hero who sought fame and fortune. Fubuki countered his claims, stating that not all heroes were driven by such motives. As her sidekicks arrived to assist, she instructed them to help Ida, Uraraka, and Native to their feet. Stain admitted that not all heroes were false but insisted that only one person, All Might, had the right to defeat him. His declaration instilled fear in those present. Fubuki challenged his beliefs, asserting that heroes had a responsibility to protect others, regardless of their motives. As they began to distance themselves from the confrontation, Fubuki reminded Stain that Ingenium was a friend who had entrusted her with his agency after his career-ending injury. She made it clear that the agency would remain under her care until Ida's brother became a pro-hero. 2. Every other agency I bought was to support heroes in continuing their work and to give them a chance to pursue their dreams. 3. Most of my sidekicks are quirkless. Her words surprised everyone, even Stain. Hellish Blizzard shared a story about a little boy who dreamed of becoming a hero. He was a late bloomer, and his quirk didn't manifest until his mid-teens. Before that, people believed he was quirkless and thought he could never achieve his dream without a quirk. However, she emphasized that quirks aren't everything when it comes to being a hero. Many heroes have quirks that don't enhance their physical abilities or are not suited for combat. Quirkless individuals often receive little to no attention. Therefore, she decided to hire aspiring quirkless heroes in the city, train them, and give them a chance to prove themselves, obtain licenses, and become her sidekicks. She clarified that she didn't become a hero for fame or fortune. All she ever wanted was to help people. She explained this, leaving Stain in shock as he remained silent during their walk until they reached the police. They arrested Stain, followed by Gran Torino reprimanding Uraraka for not staying on the train. Afterward, she, Ida, and Native were taken to the local hospital. Native's injuries were severe, requiring a week-long hospital stay. Uraraka had only a small cut on her leg, allowing her to be discharged almost immediately. Ida, however, needed to stay for 3 days to recover. Hosu's chief of police visited them, informing them that neither Uraraka nor Ida would be mentioned in the official police reports or the news. Instead, the credit for Stain's capture would go to Fubuki and Izuku. He explained that despite not having a license, Izuku acted with Fubuki's permission, which was technically not illegal quirk usage. Once that was settled, Fubuki and Izuku stayed in the hospital to speak with Ida alone. Fubuki expressed her concern about Ida's reckless decision to confront the hero killer by himself. Ida looked down, ashamed, and admitted that he was driven by anger after what happened to Tensei. He had seen the hero killer running away and acted on impulse, seeking revenge for his brother. He acknowledged that if it weren't for Fubuki, Izuku, and Uraraka, he and Native might not have survived the encounter. Izuku took responsibility, feeling guilty for not recognizing Ida's distress sooner. He had thought Ida needed space to process his brother's situation but realized he should have offered more support. Ida reassured him that it was his own decision to pursue the hero killer alone. Fubuki agreed, acknowledging her responsibility as well for not keeping a closer eye on him. Despite the situation, Izuku pointed out that they were all still alive, which was something to be grateful for. Ida expressed his sincere apologies for the trouble he caused and vowed to become the hero he always dreamed of being, worthy of the Ingenium name and reclaiming his brother's agency. Fubuki smiled warmly at him and promised to visit daily until he recovered. After bidding Ida goodnight, Fubuki and Izuku left the hospital together. The internships continued, with Fubuki helping Izuku further develop his skill in psychokinetic flight, which he quickly mastered. On the last day of the internship, Ida was discharged from the hospital, and Fubuki decided to take them on patrol again, as their previous attempt had been interrupted by the attack on Hosu. Fubuki informed them that it was time for them to return to UA, hoping their internship had given them insight into what it would be like to become pro-heroes. Ida acknowledged that the internship had been very informative and apologized again for his earlier actions. Fubuki reassured him that there was no need for further apologies. Izuku expressed his gratitude for the experience and the time spent together. He then hugged Fubuki, acknowledging that he was the boy she had mentioned regarding the hero killer. Fubuki confirmed this, explaining that he was the reason she was recruiting quirkless heroes. Although the law had changed to allow quirkless individuals to become heroes, public perception still viewed it as impossible. Izuku, a late bloomer, understood firsthand the discrimination faced by those without quirks. As they hugged, Izuku's voice cracked with emotion, and he thanked Fubuki. They said their goodbyes to her and the agency sidekicks before heading to the train station to return to UA. Once Class 1A reunited after a week, they discussed their internships and Stain's arrest. Kaminari couldn't believe that Izuku and Miss Blizzard had taken down the hero killer, while Kirishima praised Izuku's bravery, giving him a hearty pat on the back. Izuku felt embarrassed by all the attention. Later, everyone gathered with All Might in one of the faux cities, dressed in their hero costumes. All Might welcomed them back and informed them that they were about to begin hero basic training, hinting at an exciting race ahead. Take everything you've learned from your internships and apply it to this rescue training. Ida questioned whether they should be at the USJ for rescue training, but All Might explained that this facility specializes in disasters and that they were about to enter Field Gamma. Inside was an area filled with factory-like structures forming an intricate labyrinth, and they would be competing in groups of 5. Each person would start from different locations on the outskirts of the field, and All Might would send a distress signal for them to respond to. The first to find him would win, but he requested they keep property damage to a minimum. Bakugo, feeling annoyed, wondered why All Might was looking at him. All Might instructed the first group to get into their places, and Izuku, Ida, Ashido, Ojiro, and Siro took their assigned starting positions. With a signal, All Might announced the start of the challenge, and everyone rushed toward his distress signal. Izuku quickly activated his quirk, levitating off a building and soaring into the air. Within a minute, he reached All Might first. All Might greeted young Midoriya and waited for the others to catch up. He acknowledged that while Midoriya had arrived first, all the students had shown incredible improvements since the start of the year and encouraged them to keep preparing for their upcoming final exams. The students responded affirmatively, and All Might announced that the second group was up next. As they began to leave, Uraraka, who was in the next group, received good luck wishes from Izuku. Later that day, Uraraka met with All Might alone in the teacher's lounge, where he shared the history of One for All and the villain mastermind, All for One, similar to what he had told Izuku. A week passed as Class 1A studied and trained for their final exams. They began with written exams that lasted 3 days, and now it was time for the practical portion. Dressed in their costumes, they gathered with Aizawa and other UA teachers. Aizawa reminded them that it was possible to fail the final and urged them not to make any foolish mistakes. Jiro asked why all the teachers were present, and Aizawa explained that the practical would consist of battling robots. Nizu then revealed that this year, the practical had changed. Each student would be paired in teams of 2 against one of the esteemed UA teachers. The students were surprised by this announcement. Uraraka expressed disbelief at the idea of fighting teachers, and Aizawa clarified that their partners and opponents had already been chosen based on various factors. All Might encouraged the students to work together to succeed, and the matchups were announced. Akiyama and Kirishima versus Cementos, Azui and Tokoyami versus Ectoplasm, Ida and Ojiro versus Power Loader, Yaoyorozu and Todoroki versus Eraserhead, Aoyama and Bakugo versus 13, Ashido and Kaminari versus Nizu, Koda and Jiro versus Present Mike, Hagakure and Shoji versus Snipe, Siro and Mineta versus Midnight, and finally, Midoriya and Uraraka versus All Might. Nizu explained that each team would have 30 minutes to either put H&D CFFS on their teacher or escape the combat stage. To make it fair, the teachers would wear special weights that doubled their body weight. The first match began in 10 minutes. Akiyama suggested a smarter strategy against Cementos, opting to avoid direct confrontation. While they managed to evade him for a while, they ultimately found themselves overwhelmed, though they almost reached the exit. The matches for Azui and Tokoyami versus Ectoplasm, Ida and Ojiro versus Power Loader, and Yaoyorozu and Todoroki versus Eraserhead unfolded as expected. Aoyama and Bakugo held onto a railing to avoid being Seki in by 13's quirk. Frustrated, Bakugo let go and launched himself toward 13, who quickly deactivated her quirk, allowing him to take her down and win the match. The other matches proceeded similarly to the original events. Finally, it was time for the last match. Izuku and Uraraka prepared themselves to face All Might. They agreed on a plan and exchanged a high five, ready to give it their all as the announcer declared the start of their practical exam. The voice instructed Uraraka to begin, and she immediately activated 5% full cowling, darting to the side while Izuku levitated off the ground using psychokinesis, propelling himself forward. All Might stood by the exit with a smile, noticing Izuku approaching. With a powerful move of his fist, All Might unleashed a shockwave. Izuku quickly flew upwards, narrowly avoiding the blast. As he ascended, he heard a booming sound and looked down to see All Might leaping into the air toward him. All Might called out, expressing surprise at Izuku's decision to confront him directly. He pulled back his fist, preparing to strike. Izuku quickly formed a psychic barrier, but All Might shattered it with a single blow, sending Izuku hurtling through the air. Using his quirk, Izuku managed to stop himself mid-flight, but his eyes widened as he saw All Might charging at him again. Izuku dodged the number 1 hero, who zoomed past him. All Might continued to create shockwaves with each move of his fists and feet, propelling himself toward Izuku once more. Izuku formed another barrier, which All Might broke again, sending him flying. Once again, Izuku stopped himself, but All Might was relentless. In a moment of determination, Izuku surrounded All Might with a green psychic aura, halting him midair. All Might was taken aback just before Izuku swung his arms down, sending the hero crashing into the fake city below. All Might landed hard on a building's roof, crashing through it as it began to collapse around him. Izuku, feeling the strain of using his quirk, lifted several buildings with psychokinesis and slammed them down onto All Might's position. All Might thought to himself that Izuku was serious and likely distracting him while Uraraka made her escape. The debris piled on top of the number 1 hero, nearly burying him. Just when Izuku thought he could take a breather, All Might burst from the rubble, leaping toward him. Exhausted, Izuku created another barrier, but this time All Might not only broke through but also grabbed him by the collar, landing on the ground with Izuku in his grasp. All Might commended Izuku for his efforts but was interrupted by the announcer declaring that Team Midoriya and Uraraka had passed the exams, shocking All Might while Izuku grinned. All Might laughed heartily, congratulating Izuku before they both exited the combat stage. A couple of days later, Izuku was in class, trying to comfort Akiyama, Kirishima, Ashido, and Kaminari, who had failed their final exams. He encouraged them, suggesting they might still be allowed to go. Kaminari expressed his frustration, claiming they were doomed to summer school. Izuku winced as Kaminari poked him in the eyes, prompting Ida to scold Kaminari for his actions. Shiro chimed in, sharing his own uncertainty about passing. Kaminari pleaded for souvenirs from camp just as Aizawa entered the room, reminding everyone to be seated when the bell rang. Aizawa informed the class that, unfortunately, a few had not passed their exams, but everyone would still attend the training camp in the woods. Kirishima and Ashido expressed their excitement, while Aizawa explained that although 5 students had failed the practical portion, no one had bombed the written exams. He clarified that the practical battles had been designed to allow for potential victories, emphasizing the importance of teamwork. When Ojiro questioned Aizawa's earlier statements about the teachers not holding back, Aizawa admitted it was a tactic to motivate them. He reassured the class that the training camp would focus on building their strength, especially for those who had struggled. The class reacted with disbelief at the idea of a rational deception, prompting Ida to voice his concerns about trust in Aizawa. Uraraka commented on Ida's bluntness, and Aizawa acknowledged the point but insisted he had not lied about everything. He informed the 5 students who failed that they would receive extra lessons, which would be more challenging than summer school. The next day, half of Class 1A gathered at the local mall to shop for supplies for the training camp. Many recognized them from the sports festival, but the teens were not overly disturbed. Izuku suggested they split up and meet back at 3 p.m. As everyone else dispersed, he and Uraraka remained together. Izuku expressed his desire to find heavy weights to build muscle, explaining that while his quirk allowed for long-range combat, he wanted to be prepared for close encounters. Uraraka understood his reasoning and mentioned she needed bug spray, but then fell silent, seemingly lost in thought as she stared at him. Izuku Midoriya was determined to keep the troublemakers at bay. His face flushed as he hurried away, feeling a mix of embarrassment and urgency. He heard a voice call out to him, a familiar woman's voice that made him pause. "Is that you, Izuku Midoriya?" She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he turned to see her, but her next words made him freeze. "Turn around and you're done for." Tension gripped him as he recognized her. She was White Hood, a figure from the USJ attack, and her presence sent a chill down his spine. He remembered her intentions clearly. "Yes, I remember you. You tried to harm All Might and Uraraka," he replied, his heart racing. "Glad to see you remember me. Now, just act natural. I'm just an old friend you ran into at the mall. I want to have a chat. If you try to fight or run, I'll unleash my quirk on everyone around us. You know it's the same as yours psychokinesis. I can reach people from a distance with little effort, she warned, her tone calm yet menacing. If you do that, a pro-hero will come and catch you, Izuku retorted, trying to muster confidence. White Hood chuckled softly. By the time someone arrives, I'll be long gone after taking care of everyone here. Izuku clenched his fists, glancing around at the families and friends enjoying their day at the mall, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Hey, fine. Let's talk. Just don't hurt anyone. Good boy. Let's grab a seat, she said, leading him to a quieter spot, her arm casually draped around his shoulder. As they sat, Izuku took in her appearance. She wore a white hoodie and skinny jeans, her face partially hidden by a mask. Strands of light blue hair peeked out, and her eyes matched in color. Tell me, Izuku, do you believe in fate? She asked, catching him off guard. Fate? I can't say that I do, he replied, puzzled by her question. I figured you'd say that, she sighed. What if I told you I've seen the future? See the future? Isn't your quirk psychokinesis? He questioned, his curiosity piqued. It is. But years ago, I had a vision. Are you curious to know what I saw? She inquired, her gaze intense. I don't know, he stammered. Don't worry, I won't reveal everything. Just something I found very interesting, she said, leaning closer. You, young man, are going to have an important role in the events to come, she revealed, her tone serious. Just then, Uraraka appeared, concern etched on her face as she called out to him. Midoriya? Izuku turned, wanting to protect her. Oh, you're here with a friend? My apologies. I'll be leaving now, White Hood said, releasing him as she stood up and began to walk away. Wait, what are you planning? What does the League of Villains want? He called after her. You'll find out soon enough, Izuku, she replied, disappearing into the crowd. Uraraka looked at him, her voice trembling. Midoriya, was that? It was White Hood. We need to contact the police. Now, he insisted, and they quickly informed law enforcement about the encounter. The mall was temporarily closed as police and heroes conducted a thorough search, but White Hood was nowhere to be found. Later, Izuku found himself at the police station, being interviewed by Detective Tsukachi. He recounted everything that had happened, omitting details about her hair and eyes, while the detective took notes. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like they're not a monolithic organization. I'm both interested and worried about this vision of the future she mentioned, especially regarding your involvement. It's possible she fabricated it to throw you off balance. For now, just disregard what she told you. Thanks for your report, Midoriya. It's not much, but it helps, Tsukachi said. Izuku felt a wave of guilt wash over him. I'm sorry I couldn't find a way to detain her. Don't worry about it. You did an excellent job staying composed when so many lives were at stake. Most people would have panicked. Thanks to you, no one got hurt today, the detective reassured him before escorting him outside. To his surprise, Izuku saw his family waiting for him. Aizu! Fubuki exclaimed. My baby! Inko cried, rushing to embrace him. Hisashi, with a humorous expression, reminded them, he didn't get out of danger just for you two to put him in more. I'm fine, everyone. Really. The heroes and police have been taking care of me all night, Izuku assured them. Make sure they get home safe, Tsukachi instructed an officer. Sir, the cat-headed officer responded with a salute, then escorted the Midoriya family in a police car, driving away as Tsukachi waved them off. As they drove, Izuku gazed out the window, lost in thought. Suddenly he spotted White Hood again, now dressed in a striking white and black outfit, her mask and hood concealing her identity. She raised her hand and waved goodbye, leaving Izuku glaring at her retreating figure. To be continued. Some fun before the training camp began. Mineta expressed excitement about getting in some solid laps, leaving Izuku confused. Later, Izuku, along with Kaminari and Mineta, arrived at UA to meet Aizawa and Vlad King, who were discussing student quirks in an office. Mineta interrupted, and Vlad King acknowledged them. Kaminari asked about the form they submitted regarding the pool. Aizawa informed them that the school had granted permission to use the pool until 5 p.m. The three students thanked the teachers and bowed their heads in appreciation. Aizawa reminded them to make the most of their time for endurance training. After some time, Izuku contacted his classmates to invite them to the pool. Soon, all of Class 1A gathered for their endurance training, though Kaminari and Mineta were disappointed, having expected the girls to wear bikinis. Once their time at the pool concluded, Uraraka found herself at Takoba Beach at night, gazing out at the ocean. Tashinori, also known as All Might, approached her and asked what she was doing there. Uraraka explained that this was where her training began as his successor, smiling as she looked back at the ocean. Tashinori smiled at her words, and the 2-1 for all users shared a moment, staring at the moonlit horizon. He encouraged her to try her hardest at the upcoming summer training camp, and she vowed to do her best. The next day, Class 1A gathered at UA to meet Aizawa. He informed them that after finishing their first semester, they would be heading to the summer training camp, emphasizing that it would not be a time of rest but a challenge to push their limits. The students responded with enthusiasm. After a short while, Classes 1A and 1B boarded their respective buses and set off for the summer training camp. About an hour later, they arrived at a cliffside rest area and exited the bus. Shortly after, a car pulled up and 2 women in cat-themed outfits along with a young boy emerged. Mandalay greeted Aizawa, and the 2 women introduced themselves as the Wild Pussycats, striking poses that left the students dumbfounded, except for Izuku, who felt a strange familiarity with Mandalay. Aizawa introduced the pro-heroes, and the students greeted them warmly. Mandalay explained that they owned the land and pointed out the summer camp at the base of the mountain. Uraraka questioned why they had stopped at the cliff, and Azui speculated on the answer. Pixie Bob then leaped over the class and used her quirk to manipulate the ground, launching Class 1A off the cliff. Mandalay announced that they had until noon to reach the training camp, urging them to get started. The students ventured into the forest, facing challenges from earth monsters created by Pixie Bob's quirk. Several hours later, Class 1A arrived at the training camp, bruised, hungry, and exhausted. Pixie Bob playfully remarked on their performance against her dirt monsters, praising the 5 standout students: Izuku, Uraraka, Bakugu, Todoroki, and Ida. Izuku inquired about the young boy, and Mandalay introduced him as her cousin's son, Koda, encouraging him to say hello. Koda, however, was hesitant and nervous. Aizawa instructed everyone to unload their bags from the bus and mentioned dinner in the cafeteria, followed by bathing and rest before training commenced the next day. The exhausted students complied, making their way to the cafeteria for a hearty meal after missing lunch in the forest. After dinner, Izuku and his classmates headed to the male hot springs. Mineta expressed his desire to see the girls bathing on the other side of the wall, lamenting the lack of staggered bathing times. Kirishima reprimanded Mineta for his thoughts, while Izuku shared similar concerns about Mineta's intentions toward Uraraka. Mineta, undeterred, attempted to climb the wall using his quirk but was suddenly paralyzed by Izuku's green aura. Izuku, giving Mineta a stern glare, motioned for him to crash into the water, which he did, hitting his head in the process. Kirishima praised Izuku for his actions. "You protected the girl's honor and privacy." He cheered, patting Izuku on the back, proud of his friend's actions. Izuku thought about how he had indeed done just that, relaxing in the hot spring until an image of Uraraka appeared in his mind, wearing only a towel. Imaginary Uraraka thanked him for keeping that unwanted attention away, her playful demeanor making him blush deeply. Startled back to reality, Izuku quickly submerged himself in the water, hoping no one had noticed his embarrassment. Later, after finishing his bath and changing into pajamas, Izuku realized why Mandalay seemed familiar and decided to seek her out. He approached her, and she recognized him immediately, asking if she could help. Izuku hesitated before asking if she was his sister's girlfriend from the sports festival, catching Mandalay off guard. After a moment of surprise, she confirmed her identity, revealing her name as Shino Sosaki. Awkwardly, she admitted it had been a while since they last met. Curious about how he had figured it out, Mandalay listened as Izuku explained that he recognized her hair, face, and voice despite the baseball cap. They exchanged thoughts about the upcoming meeting with his parents, with Mandalay expressing her excitement mixed with anxiety about their age difference. Izuku reassured her that his parents would accept her and Fubuki, sharing his own observations about his parents' behavior since starting at UA. Mandalay, surprised by his candidness, accepted his reassurance and urged him to get to bed before Eraser caught him. They wished each other a good night and parted ways. The next day, Class 1A rose with the sun and gathered outside with Aizawa, who announced the start of a training camp aimed at enhancing their strength. He emphasized the importance of their growth, aiming for each student to earn a provisional license to face the dangers lurking in the shadows. Aizawa tossed a softball to Izuku, challenging him to throw it as he had during the fitness test. Izuku stepped up, determined to show his improvement. With encouragement from Uraraka, he used his psychokinesis to launch the ball, achieving a slight increase in distance. Aizawa noted their overall progress but pointed out that their quirks hadn't fundamentally strengthened. He warned them that the training would be intense, pushing them to their limits. Throughout the day, both Class 1A and 1B engaged in rigorous training, with Izuku focusing on lifting rock monsters with his psychokinesis, aiming to keep them suspended in the air for as long as possible. As night fell, the students prepared their meals, and Izuku noticed Koda wandering into the forest. He followed, bringing a bowl of rice and curry, hoping to share dinner. Koda, irritated, dismissed him, insisting he was fine alone and that Izuku should forget about his secret hideout. Izuku, wanting to respect Koda's space, decided to leave the curry behind and let him be. Meanwhile, on the other side of the valley, White Hood and her companions observed the camp from a distance. She remarked on their location, while her companions expressed impatience and hunger. White Hood urged them to be patient, reflecting on their past mistakes and the need for a more strategic approach in their next move. To be continued. Or rather, Night 3, since Pixie Bob had announced earlier that they would be doing a test of courage. Kirishima, Akiyama, Ashido, Kaminari, and Siro were absent, having failed their final exams from last semester, as Aizawa took them back to camp for remedial lessons. Pixie Bob giggled as she stood with her teammates Mandalay, Ragdoll, and Tiger. Pixie Bob explained that Class B would start as the Scares. Once they were in place, Class A would leave in pairs every 3 minutes to collect tags with their names on them at the far end of the route. Tokoyami declared his excitement with a phrase about revelry in the dark, while Uraraka wondered if he would keep saying that. Pixie Bob continued, instructing the Scarers not to make physical contact and to use their quirks to terrify the others. Tiger added that the winners would be the creative students who could scare the most people. Ragdoll then suggested drawing slips of paper to determine partners. With the remedial students not participating, Izuku ended up without a partner due to the odd number of students. As about 12 minutes passed, the forest echoed with the screams of Jiro and Hagakure. Suddenly, Pixie Bob sniffed the air and caught everyone's attention, questioning if there was smoke in the distance. Ida and Ojiro speculated about a possible fire on the mountain when Pixie Bob began to float, enveloped in a pink aura, only to be knocked unconscious moments later. The group turned to see two villains. One a reptilian humanoid resembling the hero killer, Stain, and the other a transgender woman wielding a giant iron rod. Magna announced their intent to deal with the students, while Mineta expressed disbelief that villains had found them. Izuku rushed to help Pixie Bob but was stopped by Tiger, who sensed the danger. Mandalay warned them of the situation, and Izuku realized Koda was missing. Spinner introduced himself and his group as the League of Villains Vanguard Action Squad, while Magna threatened Pixie Bob. Tiger defended her, expressing her dreams of happiness, and Spinner dismissed the idea of heroes having personal lives. Mandalay communicated with Ragdoll to ensure the other students' safety and urged the kids to escape. Izuku insisted on finding Koda, determined to protect him. Ida reluctantly agreed, and the others followed as Izuku used his psychokinesis to search for Koda. Minutes later, Izuku reached the mountainside, spotting Koda in danger from a large villain with blonde hair. He quickly created a force field around Koda, shielding him from the villain's attack. Koda was surprised to see Izuku, who reassured him that he was there to keep him safe. However, the villain broke free, and Izuku prepared for a confrontation. Muscular, the villain, recognized Izuku's powers and expressed his intent to capture him. As he charged, Izuku formed a psychic barrier just in time, but the force of the impact shattered it, sending them both tumbling off the cliff. Izuku caught Kota midair with his psychokinesis, ensuring his safety. Muscular taunted Izuku, inquiring about his friends Bakugo and Tokoyami. Izuku's eyes widened as he dodged another attack, but Muscular managed to grab him by the leg, leaving the situation precarious. Izuku and Kota found themselves in a precarious situation as they fell into the forest below, the barrier Izuku had created shattering upon impact. As they regained their footing, Muscular landed nearby, his laughter echoing through the trees. Muscular taunted them, reveling in the chaos. He mocked Izuku's intentions to save Kota, dismissing them as pathetic. In response, Izuku glared fiercely at the villain, using his psychokinetic abilities to lift Muscular and send him crashing through the trees before sliding him across the ground. Muscular stood up, bruised and with blood trickling from his nose, but his twisted smile remained. He acknowledged Izuku's strength but insisted it wasn't enough to defeat him. With a fierce yell, he charged at Izuku, who quickly raised a barrier. However, it shattered once more, sending Izuku flying into a tree. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he fell to the ground. As Muscular approached, Kota bravely threw a small rock at the villain's head, demanding to know about the water hose heroes, his parents. Izuku's eyes widened in realization, understanding the deep-seated hatred Kota held for heroes. Muscular, amused, revealed that he had a personal vendetta against Kota's parents, claiming they were responsible for his own suffering. Kota's anger flared as he confronted Muscular, expressing his disdain for the villain and the senselessness of their world. Muscular, unfazed, continued to taunt them, revealing his twisted philosophy about promises and consequences. Just as he prepared to strike Kota, Izuku intervened, using his powers to freeze Muscular in place. Izuku lifted Muscular into the air, determined to protect Kota. Muscular, undeterred, challenged Izuku, questioning whether he would attempt to ragdoll him again. Izuku affirmed his commitment to saving Kota, unleashing his powers once more and slamming Muscular into the ground and trees repeatedly. The villain's demeanor shifted as he began to experience real pain, his earlier confidence waning. Muscular's anger boiled over as he was thrown into a tree, demanding to know if Izuku had been holding back. Izuku, focused on his goal, continued his assault until he finally released Muscular, who fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Panting, Izuku was soon joined by Kota, who checked on him. Despite the pain, Izuku reassured Kota that he was fine and urged him to head back to camp. However, their moment of respite was shattered when they heard Muscular groan, struggling to rise. Muscular refused to accept defeat, pulling out a syringe from his pocket. Izuku and Kota watched in shock as Muscular injected himself, his muscles bulging and height increasing dramatically. With a maniacal laugh, he charged at them, demanding to see their blood. Izuku instinctively pushed Kota out of harm's way, but Muscular's punch sent him flying. The impact left Izuku gasping for breath as he crashed through branches before hitting the ground hard. He felt the sharp pain in his ribs, realizing the severity of his injuries. As Muscular closed in, Izuku quickly dodged, narrowly avoiding another attack. He recognized that Muscular had become significantly stronger, likely due to the syringe. Determined, Izuku summoned his powers again, attempting to hold Muscular in place, but the villain's relentless advance continued. Muscular laughed at Izuku's efforts, slowly inching closer despite the strain. Izuku felt the weight of exhaustion from the recent training, realizing he was at a disadvantage. He urged Muscular to stop, but the villain's taunts only fueled his determination. Finally, Muscular broke through Izuku's defenses, delivering a powerful punch that sent him crashing to the ground. Dazed and in pain, Izuku struggled to recover as Muscular mocked him, questioning his strength. With a cruel laugh, Muscular stomped down, causing Izuku to cry out in agony as he felt his leg give way. Muscular relished in his victory, assuring Izuku that he wouldn't kill him, as someone in a white cloak wanted him alive. Confused and desperate, Izuku asked what the White Hood wanted from him, but Muscular shrugged, indifferent to the motives of others. As long as he could do what he wanted, the villain cared little for the reasons behind her interest in Izuku. He stepped on Izuku's head, pressing down hard as the teen cried out in pain. The villain continued to torment Izuku, applying pressure to his skull against the ground with his boot. The pain intensified, causing Izuku's vision to blur, and he felt he might lose consciousness at any moment. Just then, Koda appeared, having chased after them. He watched in horror as Izuku suffered, but that fear quickly transformed into a determined rage. Using his quirk, he splashed Muscular with water. Muscular, taken aback, exclaimed in confusion about the unexpected water. Koda shouted for the villain to let Izuku go, tears streaming down his face. Izuku called out to Koda, but Muscular interrupted, threatening the young boy before being unexpectedly struck in the face. The surprise attack sent Muscular flying, leaving Izuku and Koda stunned. Their savior emerged in the form of Uraraka, who rushed to check on Izuku, her voice filled with concern. Izuku noticed her broken arm, realizing she had used all of her strength in the attack. Koda recognized her as the pretty girl he had seen before. Izuku asked how she had found them, and Uraraka explained that she and Tsu had been attacked by a dangerous girl. After taking care of the situation, they had heard a loud noise and seen a dust cloud in the mountains. She had decided to come to their aid, and now she wished she could have arrived sooner. With Koda's help, she assisted Izuku to his feet. Their relief quickly turned to dread as Muscular groaned and began to rise, a maniacal grin spreading across his face. Muscular, now back on his feet, recognized Uraraka and expressed his intent to eliminate her. Izuku urged Uraraka to use her zero-gravity quirk, and she complied, lifting all three of them into the air. Muscular attempted to stop them, but Izuku propelled them higher, adrenaline fueling his determination as he panted heavily. He asked Uraraka which way the camp was, and she pointed straight ahead. They realized that if they could reach Mr. Aizawa and Vlad King, they would have a chance to defeat Muscular. Just then, Mandalay's voice echoed in their minds, granting them permission to fight back against the villains. Uraraka chuckled at the timing, and Izuku joined her in laughter. Koda, curious about their relationship, startled them with his question, causing both teens to blush. They denied it, but Koda only grinned, insisting they were definitely together. Suddenly, they turned to see Muscular leaping toward them from the trees, shouting for them to stop. Izuku quickly maneuvered to evade the villain as he fell deeper into the forest, determined to reach the campsite. After a few minutes, relief washed over them as they spotted the campsite ahead, but their smiles faded when they saw Muscular leaping in front of them. He yelled triumphantly, preparing to strike, but Izuku created a barrier to block the attack. The barrier shattered, sending the three youngsters crashing through the trees. Izuku tried to make them float safely, but they fell hard to the ground, and he briefly lost consciousness. When he regained his senses, he saw an injured Uraraka and an unconscious Koda nearby. Muscular landed with a loud crash, boasting about the chase before kicking Izuku onto his back. He taunted Izuku, claiming he was exhausted and ready to take him back to the league. Just then, Muscular's muscle fibers began retracting into his body, and he was caught off guard when Aizawa kicked him in the head. Uraraka called out to Mr. Aizawa, who assured the kids that he was there to help them. Muscular, bewildered, questioned the situation. The tension in the air was palpable as Aizawa charged towards Muscular, determined to prove his strength without relying on his quirk. He leaped over the villain, attempting to restrain him with his capture scarf. However, Muscular swiftly grabbed the scarf, pulling Aizawa closer. Aizawa released his grip and retaliated with a kick to Muscular's face, using the momentum to propel himself away. Muscular, with a taunting grin, tackled Aizawa into a tree, causing it to splinter as it fell. Aizawa struggled to break free, but Muscular's overwhelming strength kept him pinned down, landing blow after blow. Izuku and Uraraka watched in horror as their teacher endured the assault, blood staining Muscular's fists. Fueled by anger, Uraraka leaped towards Muscular, her eyes filled with determination. She shouted for him to back off, launching a punch aimed at his face. The impact created a powerful shockwave, forcing Izuku to shield his eyes from the gust of wind. As the dust settled, Uraraka lay on the ground, her arm visibly injured, while Muscular remained unscathed. Just in time, Aizawa had lost consciousness, inadvertently protecting her from the attack. Muscular reveled in his newfound strength, boasting about the trigger drag that had enhanced his abilities. He then seized Uraraka by the hair, lifting her off the ground. With a malicious grin, he began to squeeze her head, causing her to cry out in pain. Desperate, she attempted to punch him with her uninjured arm, but Muscular caught her, stopping her in her tracks. He demanded to hear her scream, and with a sickening crack, he broke her arm, eliciting a cry of agony from her. Izuku's anger boiled over as he witnessed his friend's suffering. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his eyes shutting tight in determination. Muscular noticed the movement and mocked the young hero, surprised that he still had fight left in him. As Izuku opened his eyes, they glowed a fierce green, and he glared at Muscular with unwavering resolve. With a roar, Izuku charged at Muscular, surrounding himself in a psychic barrier. The impact sent Muscular crashing across the ground, uprooting trees and tearing through the landscape. Muscular screamed in frustration as he struggled against Izuku's power, but the young hero held him in a psychokinetic grip, tossing him around like a rag doll. Muscular, now lying in a large crater, groaned in pain but managed to grin defiantly at Izuku, challenging him to finish the fight. In response, Izuku gathered dirt and rocks around him, lifting them high before unleashing them downwards in a furious display of power. Exhausted, he floated down to the pile of debris that had buried Muscular. As Izuku's strength waned, he lost consciousness, but not before catching a glimpse of White Hood approaching him. She acknowledged his efforts, stating that Muscular had played his part well. Assuring him that she meant no harm, she revealed that the League of Villains had greater plans for him before he succumbed to darkness. Time passed, and the League of Villains had departed the training camp. Vlad King, the teacher of Class 1B, contacted rescue workers and firefighters, who arrived shortly after. Out of the 40 students, 14 were in critical condition due to Mustard's gas quirk, while others suffered various injuries. One student remained missing. Among the 6 pro heroes, Pixie Bob had sustained a serious head injury, Ragdoll was unaccounted for, and Aizawa had been severely beaten. Despite the capture of 2 villains, Moonfish and Mustard, the heroes faced a significant defeat that night. For the next 2 days, the media swarmed the UA school gates, demanding statements and answers regarding the attack on the training camp. During this time, Uraraka and the other injured students recovered in the hospital. Without Izuku's help, Bakugo and Todoroki had to confront Moonfish alone, ultimately defeating him but at the cost of Bakugo sustaining injuries. Todoroki later used his fire to assist Tokoyami in controlling Dark Shadow. Uraraka, nearly fully recovered thanks to Recovery Girl's visits, sat on a bench outside the hospital, lost in thought as she processed the events of the training camp. Akiyama approached her, prompting her to look up and smile at the sight of her classmates. Kaminari mentioned the media frenzy surrounding the school, while Sato remarked that the situation was worse than the incident at the USJ. Azui agreed, and Uraraka inquired about their classmates' conditions. Ida informed her that Yaoyorozu and Bakugo were recovering well, but Aizawa had been in the worst condition. Uraraka expressed concern for Kota, relieved to hear he was fine after a concussion. Todoroki noted Midoriya's absence, and Ishido reacted to his comment. Uraraka sighed, acknowledging Todoroki's point. She reflected on how Midoriya had always put himself in danger to save others, and the weight of the training camp's events weighed heavily on her. She felt helpless, knowing he had been kidnapped while she could do nothing to assist him. Uraraka felt overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face as her classmates tried to comfort her. Bakugo stood in the doorway, his explosive personality evident as he addressed the group. He questioned Uraraka's state, urging her to stop crying over Midoriya's kidnapping. Uraraka, still upset, challenged him, asking what he suggested she do. Bakugo, frustrated, insisted that sitting around wouldn't help anyone. Akiyama then suggested they could go rescue Midoriya. Uraraka was taken aback, and Akiyama explained that he and Kirishima had spoken to Yaoyorozu, who had developed a device to track the villains. Kirishima added that they needed to act quickly. Ida, however, argued that they should leave the situation to the professional heroes, emphasizing the importance of following the law. Kirishima expressed his frustration, feeling helpless after hearing what had happened to their friends. He declared that he couldn't just stand by while Midoriya was in danger. Kaminari tried to calm him down, but Azui supported Ida's viewpoint. Kirishima, still determined, insisted that they had to do something. Bakugo, frustrated with the indecision, declared that if they were serious about finding Midoriya, he would join them. Ashido questioned whether they would really follow through with the plan, and Todoroki confirmed that he would join as well. Ida was incredulous, but Shoji reminded everyone that they needed to think rationally. Aoyama and Tokoyami echoed the sentiment, stressing the importance of adhering to the law. Uraraka, feeling passionate, argued that rescuing Midoriya was the right thing to do. She believed that sitting back was not an option, as Midoriya would do anything to help them if the roles were reversed. Her words resonated with the group, and after a moment of silence, she left to visit Midoriya in the hospital. Later, Kirishima and Akiyama arrived at the hospital, ready to discuss their plan. Kirishima informed Uraraka that they needed to act that night, and Akiyama encouraged her determination. Uraraka expressed her resolve to join them, and they welcomed her decision. As night fell, the group gathered outside the hospital, waiting for Uraraka and Yaoyorozu. When they arrived, Ida confronted Uraraka, expressing his concerns about their reckless decision. He worried about the consequences of their actions and the potential danger they faced. Uraraka defended their choice, emphasizing their friendship with Midoriya and the urgency of the situation. Ida, still worried, expressed his fear for their safety. Bakugo interrupted, asserting their commitment to saving Midoriya and urging Ida to either join them or step aside. Realizing their determination, Ida reluctantly agreed to join the mission. Uraraka hugged him in gratitude, and together, the 7 UA students set off on their quest to rescue their friend. This is for entertainment purposes only, and I hope you enjoy the chapter. Sometime before Uraraka and the others headed out to save Izuku, the scene shifts to the morning after the attack, with police arriving at the Midoriya household and knocking on the door. Less than a minute later, the door opens to reveal Hisashi. Hisashi asks if he can help, and the police officers confirm they are looking for him. Inko, hearing the commotion, inquires about who is at the door. Hisashi informs her that it's the police and invites them inside. The Midoriya parents sit down at the dining room table across from the 2 officers. One officer delivers the somber news that the League of Villains attacked UA students at their training camp. Inko gasps in panic, and Hisashi comforts her by holding her hand. He then asks about their son, Izuku. The second officer reluctantly informs them that Izuku has been kidnapped by the villains. Inko's heart sinks at the news, leaving her momentarily speechless. Hisashi calls out to her in concern, but she suddenly collapses to the floor. He and the officers rush to check on her. Meanwhile, other police officers visit the homes of Fubuki and Tatsumaki to share the distressing news. Fubuki breaks down in tears upon learning that her younger brother has been taken. Adding to her distress, she learns that her girlfriend, Mandalay, was also attacked and injured that night. Tatsumaki, however, remains silent, her expression filled with fear and panic. The eldest Midoriya sibling orders the officers to leave with a fierce glare, and they comply. Tatsumaki clenches her fists, her psychic powers lifting objects around her apartment before she releases her frustration with a scream. Time passes as Inko is rushed to the hospital after suffering a panic attack. Hisashi sits beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, tears in his eyes. The door bursts open as Fubuki and Tatsumaki arrive, having heard about their mother's condition. They rush to her side, calling out for her. Hisashi expresses his frustration and despair before a doctor enters the room. Tatsumaki demands good news, and the doctor reassures them that Inko is stable and will make a full recovery. Fubuki breathes a sigh of relief, hugging her unconscious mother. The doctor gives them some space before leaving. Hours pass as Hisashi and his daughters stay by Inko's side until visiting hours end. He hugs and kisses his daughters before reluctantly leaving the hospital. Tatsumaki bids farewell to her younger sister before departing as well. As Fubuki exits the hospital, she encounters Shino, her girlfriend and fellow pro-hero Mandalay. Fubuki rushes to her, embracing her tightly and sharing a quick kiss. Fubuki asks if Shino is okay, and Shino confirms she has only minor injuries. Shino then expresses concern for Fubuki's mother, and Fubuki reassures her that Inko is stable but worries about their father and sister's emotional state. Shino apologizes, but Fubuki insists it's not her fault. They discuss their next steps, with Fubuki determined to join the heroes being assembled to rescue Izuku. Shino wishes she could join but explains her responsibility to her injured nephew, Koda. They share a tender moment before parting ways. The next day, Detective Tsukachi and a dozen police officers gather for a meeting in a large office alongside pro-heroes, including All Might, Endeavor, and others. Tsukachi expresses gratitude for their attendance when Fubuki and Tatsumaki enter. Tsukachi questions their presence, but the sisters assert their intention to join the raid to rescue Izuku. Tsukachi tries to reason with them, but Tatsumaki's anger is palpable. The sisters make it clear they will help, and the tension in the room is thick as they unleash their psychic auras, intimidating everyone present. After a moment of silence, Tsukachi nervously welcomes them aboard. Some time later, the story shifts to Izuku, who slowly opens his eyes to find himself restrained in a chair with large metal cuffs on his hands and feet. To his surprise, White Hood sits beside him, gently stroking his hair and humming a lullaby, reminiscent of how his mother and Fubuki used to comfort him. Izuku feels a strange familiarity with her actions, but he is unsure how to respond. Shigaraki, the villain, comments on Izuku's awakening as he takes in the surroundings, which include other members of the League of Villains. Compress and Magna stood nearby as White Hood expressed her relief at Midoriya's awakening. Shigaraki scoffed at the situation, questioning why they were interested in someone he deemed a threat. He suggested they eliminate Midoriya on the spot, but White Hood insisted that Midoriya was their guest and deserved to be treated with respect. Dabi, skeptical, pointed out that Midoriya had been unconscious for 2 days and could pose a danger upon waking. This revelation surprised Midoriya, who realized how vulnerable he was. Twice, displaying his unpredictable nature, attempted to defend White Hood's stance, but Dabi remained unconvinced. White Hood reassured them that she would handle any threat Midoriya posed. Shigaraki remarked that Midoriya should understand he couldn't defeat them all. Midoriya, feeling the weight of their words, acknowledged his precarious position, especially with White Hood, the most formidable among them, present. White Hood then asked if anyone would release Midoriya. Dabi handed the key to Twice, who hesitated, prompting Toga to snatch it and offer to unlock Midoriya's restraints. With a playful demeanor, she approached him, but White Hood reminded her to refrain from any harm. Toga complied, unlocking Midoriya's bindings, and he cautiously stood, assessing the villains around him. Midoriya inquired about their intentions. White Hood reminded him of her ability to see the future and revealed that she had witnessed his immense potential. She claimed that his psychokinesis quirk would surpass even the number 2 hero, Terrible Tornado. When she invited him to join the League of Villains, Midoriya was taken aback, expressing disbelief at the suggestion. Magna warned him to watch his tone, but White Hood encouraged a civil discussion about the offer. Suddenly, a knock interrupted them. A voice announced a pizza delivery, causing confusion until All Might burst through the wall, surprising everyone. Shigaraki called for Kurogiri to act, but before he could, Hellish Blizzard appeared, using her powers to restrain the villains. Dabi attempted to retaliate but was swiftly subdued by her. Gran Torino urged the villains to cooperate, and All Might declared that they were surrounded by heroes and police. As the scene unfolded, Midoriya called out to All Might, relieved to see him. Hellish Blizzard expressed her joy at his safety, and All Might reassured him that he was now secure. Meanwhile, Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Bakugo, Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki had tracked a signal to a warehouse filled with Nomu. They took cover as pro-heroes arrived, and Bakugo expressed frustration at their need to find Midoriya. As they entered the warehouse, Tiger spotted Ragdoll, who was unconscious, and rushed to her side. Best Jeanist instructed Terrible Tornado to take Ragdoll for medical attention while the others secured the area. Terrible Tornado swiftly levitated Ragdoll and flew her to the nearest hospital before returning to the warehouse. However, she was met with a shocking explosion that sent debris flying. Hovering above the chaos, She saw the pro-heroes incapacitated and a man in a suit standing over an injured best jeanist. The man's gaze met hers, sending a chill down her spine. The group hiding nearby felt paralyzed with fear as the man approached Terrible Tornado, introducing himself with a sinister tone. She demanded to know who he was, but he dismissed her question, leaving an air of tension hanging in the room. More importantly, the masked villain challenged Terrible Tornado to show him what society's silver medal could do. Red and black lightning surged from his body, and Terrible Tornado's aura glowed brightly, enveloping her before she launched herself toward the ground. However, the villain halted midair, astonishing the Esper. Even All Might could not achieve such a feat. The masked villain chuckled as he soared back toward Terrible Tornado, prompting her to raise a force field. With a powerful punch, his fist and arm expanded, shattering the force field in a single blow and sending Terrible Tornado crashing into an empty building. Moments later, she emerged from the wreckage, a trickle of blood visible at the back of her head, staining her dress. The villain mocked her, expressing his disappointment, which only fueled the anger of the number 2 hero. She charged at him, determined to unleash everything she had. The scene shifted to a bar where the heroes had successfully restrained the League of Villains. Shigaraki, frustrated, lamented that their final adversary had arrived at their doorstep. He called for Kurogiri, but before he could activate a warp gate, Edge Shot swiftly knocked him unconscious. All Might addressed Shigaraki, stating that they had spent the last 2 days tracking him down and that his nomus were being neutralized. He declared that Shigaraki and his accomplices would be arrested and face trial for their crimes. Shigaraki scoffed at the notion that this was the end, insisting it was merely the beginning. He ridiculed the concepts of peace and justice, asserting that society was a joke and that they aimed to reshape the world by eliminating All Might, the pillar of that society. Gran Torino interjected, demanding to know the whereabouts of Shigaraki's leader. Suddenly, strange blobs of black liquid appeared, and nomus emerged from them. Hellish Blizzard was shocked to see the nomus, while Gran Torino urged Edge Shot to stop Kurogiri, but Edge Shot insisted he was already incapacitated. As the nomus continued to pour in, All Might commanded the heroes not to release them under any circumstances. Hellish Blizzard affirmed her commitment to handle the nomus, acting a force field to block an incoming attack. She urged All Might to save her brother, prompting a determined response from the number 1 hero before he leaped into the air. Meanwhile, Izuku found himself engulfed in the black liquid, coughing as it filled his mouth. A voice greeted him, and he looked up to see a tall man in a suit and sinister mask. Upon recognizing him as All for One, Izuku's heart sank. The villain chuckled, revealing that he had been eager to meet Izuku. To Izuku's horror, he saw his elder sister, Terrible Tornado, injured and held by All for One. In a panic, he caught her as she was tossed toward him, desperately urging her to wake up. His anger surged as he glared at All for One, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. Unbeknownst to Izuku, a group of UA students, including Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Ida, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Bakugo, hid behind a wall, paralyzed with fear as they listened to the unfolding confrontation. All for One spoke, suggesting that White Hood had informed Izuku of his potential to surpass her and his sisters. He invited Izuku to join him, offering a place among the League of Villains. Izuku vehemently rejected the idea, shouting in defiance. White Hood interjected, reminding Izuku of his struggles over the years, including the bullying he faced for lacking a quirk. She revealed her knowledge of his past, including a painful memory of Terrible Tornado telling him to give up on his dreams of becoming a hero. Izuku was taken aback, questioning how she knew such details. All for One confirmed that White Hood had been watching Izuku for years, ever since she had a vision of him. Izuku, feeling cornered, demanded to know how long they had been stalking him, while White Hood continued to manipulate his emotions by recalling his sister's harsh words. "Do you remember what she said?" Izuku recalled Tatsumaki's words clearly, urging him to dream of something else and declaring that he couldn't become a hero. The memory echoed in his mind, casting a shadow over his expression. All for One grinned beneath his mask, questioning what kind of sister would say such things to her younger sibling. He extended his hand to Izuku, promising to complete his training and remove the societal restrictions that held him back from reaching his true potential, offering allies who would appreciate him for more than just his quirk. Izuku hesitated, glancing at his unconscious sister, then at the terrified Uraraka peeking from behind debris. He looked back at All for One, trying to gauge the villain's intent. He declared that he would never join him, pushing the villain back with a surge of psychokinesis that caught All for One off guard, sending him crashing into a wall. All for One, unfazed, levitated and charged at Izuku. In a desperate move, Izuku grabbed Tatsumaki and created a barrier around them. However, the force of All for One's punch shattered the barrier, sending Izuku flying. He lost his grip on Tatsumaki, and they both hit the ground hard. Izuku's heart raced as he saw her unconscious body rolling among the ruins. All for One seized Izuku by the head, slamming him into the ground. Uraraka watched in horror as All for One lifted Izuku, revealing his injuries. The villain declared that there was no choice for Izuku, releasing him only to be interrupted by All Might, who dove in from the sky, ready to confront All for One. The clash between the two heroes created a powerful shockwave, sending Izuku and the villains flying. All for One taunted All Might about his delayed arrival, while Izuku watched in shock, realizing the extent of All for One's power. All Might vowed not to repeat the mistakes of their last battle, determined to take Izuku to safety and send All for One and his league of villains to prison. He charged at the villain, who countered with a powerful blast that sent All Might crashing through several buildings. Izuku called out for All Might, but All for One assured him that the hero would survive. He commanded Shigaraki to flee with Izuku as black and red tendrils emerged from his fingers, activating Kurogyari's Warp Gate quirk. Shigaraki hesitated, concerned for his master, but All for One urged him to escape while he dealt with All Might. As All Might returned to the fray, determined to stop their escape, the villains prepared to seize Izuku. The green-haired teen braced himself for a fight, but White Hood used psychokinetic force to push him to the ground. Toga attempted to grab him, managing to cut his arm, causing a small trickle of blood to flow from the minor wound. For several minutes, Izuku struggled against the villains, but White Hood thwarted his every attempt to escape. In a moment of desperation, he used his psychokinesis to grip White Hood's throat, causing her to choke and fall to her knees. Toga and Twice rushed to her side, calling out in alarm. Just as Mr. Compress prepared to use his quirk to capture Izuku, reinforcements arrived. Hellish Blizzard, Endeavor, Gran Torino, Edgeshot, and Kamui Woods joined the battle, while Gang Orca and Tiger carried the injured Tatsumaki away for help. Hellish Blizzard, enraged by the sight of her sister, slammed White Hood to the ground with her psychokinesis. Izuku took the opportunity to flee, propelled by the distraction created by the heroes. He headed toward the hiding spot where Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Ida, Bakugu, Todoroki, and Yaoyorozu were waiting. He expressed relief at seeing them but warned that they shouldn't have come. Kirishima apologized, showing their unwavering support for their friend. But they couldn't leave it to chance, for the professionals would bring her back. Hellish Blizzard was struggling against White Hood, who relentlessly slammed her to the ground and tossed her among the debris. White Hood let out a powerful force of psychokinetic energy, sending Hellish Blizzard flying. She then forced her opponent to the ground, increasing gravity and making it difficult for Hellish Blizzard to move. The Esper tried to free herself, but White Hood was simply the stronger of the two. White Hood declared that it was time for Blizzard to meet her end, intensifying the gravity. Hellish Blizzard cried out in pain, feeling as if her bones were about to break. Izuku watched in horror, his eyes widening. He rushed toward White Hood, unable to hold back. The villain turned to see him charging at her, crashing into her like a missile and headbutting her mask. The impact sent both of them flying, releasing Hellish Blizzard from her grasp. Izuku groaned, clutching his head in pain before getting back up to see White Hood with a cracked mask. To his surprise, more cracks formed until the entire mask shattered. Hellish Blizzard's eyes widened in shock as she saw White Hood's face. The villainess turned out to be a beautiful young woman in her 20s, with long light blue hair and matching eyes. Hellish Blizzard recognized her and grinned. White Hood confirmed her identity, and hellish blizzard stared in disbelief. Izuku, confused, asked if she knew her. White Hood, almost pleading, questioned if Izuku did not remember her. She reminded him of their past, how she used to visit his house when he was younger. The villainess then glared at hellish blizzard, accusing her of doing something unforgivable. Not understanding the situation, Izuku unleashed a powerful psychokinetic force, sending White Hood flying. He asked hellish blizzard what she meant by that, but she was interrupted by a shockwave caused by All Might and All for One clashing. Hellish blizzard shook her head, snapping back to reality. She urged Izuku to get out of there, promising to explain later. Izuku levitated toward his classmates, who were urging him to hurry. Shigaraki, determined to stop him, leaped toward Izuku, but the young Esper sent him flying with his psychokinesis. Izuku then used his quirk to carry Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Ida, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Bakugo away from the battlefield. Shigaraki growled in frustration, shouting in anger. All for One commanded White Hood to take Shigaraki and the rest of the League through the warp gate. She complied, using her psychokinesis to pull Shigaraki and the League into the warp gate, leaving All for One behind. Minutes later, Izuku and his friends were far from the battlefield, walking among a huge crowd as the news broadcasted the fight between All Might and All for One live. Tension filled the air as everyone watched the battle unfold. On the battlefield, hellish blizzard held the unconscious terrible tornado, feeling the shockwaves create powerful winds. She tightened her grip, determined not to let her elder sister be sent flying. As she opened her eyes, she cried out for Tatsu, relieved to see her safe. Terrible tornado, confused, asked what was happening as she noticed All Might fighting All for One. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw All Might deflating into his true form. The world watched, yet All Might continued to smile and fight, despite his weakened state. All for One mocked him, believing he had already won, urging All Might to give up. But All Might refused, fighting like a true hero. Irritated, All for One aimed an air cannon quirk to finish him off, but he froze when he saw Terrible Tornado and Hellish Blizzard using their quirks, their eyes glowing with determination. All Might smiled, grateful for their support. He declared that it would end there, and with a powerful punch, he collided with All for One's face, sending shockwaves through the area. The impact created a tornado that lifted rubble and chunks of demolished buildings high into the air. Everyone stood in silence until the dust settled, revealing All for One lying on the ground, defeated. All Might raised his hand into the air, clenching it into a fist as he struck a victory pose. The world erupted in cheers for their symbol of peace as he used the last of his power to stand tall one final time. Todoroki suggested they take Midoriya to the police to ensure he was all right. The teens agreed, but before they could take 2 steps, All Might, having deflated for good, pointed at the camera. This caught Uraraka's attention, and she looked at her teacher. All Might delivered a hidden message that brought Uraraka to tears, prompting Izuku to offer her an apologetic hug as they cried together. After the battle in Kamino, Uraraka, Kirishima, Akiyama, Ida, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Bakugo took Izuku to the police station. The young Esper waved goodbye to his friends and classmates before entering the station with 2 officers. Bakugo grumbled about the situation, expressing his frustration that they had wasted their time, while Kirishima tried to encourage him to be more supportive. "Aren't you a little glad that Midoriya is safe?" Bakugo scoffed before walking away, followed by everyone else as they returned home. While Izuku shared his experience with the police, omitting details about his classmates' unauthorized involvement and Fubuki's mysterious link to White Hood, Hisashi burst into the station after hearing his son was there. Hisashi called out to Izuku, pulling him into a tight embrace. He expressed his relief that Izuku was okay, and Izuku returned the hug, feeling grateful for his father's presence. Once the police cleared Izuku to leave, Hisashi drove him to the hospital where Inko was, explaining that she had a panic attack upon learning about his kidnapping. Izuku's heart raced with worry for his mother. Upon arriving at the hospital, they entered Inko's room to find her awake, comforting a crying Fubuki, while a bandaged Tatsumaki rested in her own bed beside Inko. Izuku rushed to his mother, tears streaming down his face as he embraced her. Inko softly cried out, relieved to see her son safe, and Izuku expressed his worry when his father informed him of the situation. Inko reassured him that she was okay now, and Hisashi joined in for a family hug. Meanwhile, Uraraka had just returned home, her parents frantic but relieved to see her safe. She went to her room and checked her phone, noticing All Might's image trending on social media. As she drifted off to sleep, she hoped everything would be all right. Hours later, she woke up to missed calls from All Might and a message asking her to meet him at Takoba Beach. Without telling her parents, she quickly put on her shoes and left the house. At the beach, she found All Might, now wrapped in bandages and an arm cast. He didn't reprimand her for sneaking out, as he was unaware of her and the others' actions at Kamino. Their conversation unfolded similarly to before, with All Might announcing his retirement and the end of One for All's legacy from his body. He promised to dedicate himself to training Uraraka, bringing her to tears. The next day, All Might, now Toshinori, visited the hospital to meet Izuku, Inko, Hisashi, Tatsumaki, and Fubuki. He greeted everyone and asked if they had received the notice from UA about moving students into dormitories. Hisashi confirmed that they had discussed it, while Inko expressed her skepticism about UA's ability to care for Izuku. Hisashi reassured her that they were giving permission for Izuku to continue attending UA. Touched by their decision, Izuku expressed his gratitude. Tatsumaki insisted that UA needed to do a better job protecting the students, or else she would take matters into her own hands. Toshinori thanked the Midoriyas for their decision and assured them that UA would work to ensure the safety of its students. Inko then made a surprising announcement, revealing her PR in CY, which left everyone momentarily speechless. Hisashi was overjoyed, and they shared a kiss, while Izuku and Fubuki processed the news with tears of joy. As the students moved into UA's new dormitories, Class 1A explored their new rooms. Tsuyu voiced her frustrations about the students who had gone to Kamino, and Uraraka, taking Izuku's place, hugged her, apologizing for worrying her. One day in class, Aizawa informed 1A that they needed to prepare for the upcoming provisional license exam, which included developing ultimate moves. The day of the exam arrived, and 1A gathered at the stadium. Aizawa emphasized the importance of doing their best, as passing the exam would make them semi-pros. Shortly after, they met students from the Shiketsu and Ketsubutsu academies, along with Ketsubutsu's teacher, Ms. Joke, who had a one-sided affection for Eraserhead. Aizawa urged 1A to change into their costumes quickly for orientation, and they complied. Yakumaru Mera introduced herself from the Hero Public Safety Commission, explaining that there were over 1,000 examinees competing in a free-for-all exercise. He looked extremely tired as he addressed the 1,000-plus students before him, unable to meet their gazes. He explained that out of all the examinees, only 100 would pass and receive their licenses. This revelation shocked everyone, as they had been informed that 50% would pass, not a mere 7%. He went on to describe the exercise, where each examinee would have 3 targets placed on their bodies. Each examinee would receive 6 balls to throw at the targets of others. The targets would glow when hit, and if all 3 were struck, that examinee would be out. The person who hit the last target would receive credit for it. Yakumaru Mera stated that to move on to the next round, they needed to take down 2 opponents. Staff members walked around distributing ball and targets to each examinee, allowing them a few minutes to prepare. Suddenly, the enormous room's walls folded open, revealing a stadium filled with various environments similar to the USJ. Izuku encouraged everyone to stick together and fight as a group, and most of Class 1A agreed with their class representative. Bakugo, however, decided to go off on his own, which surprised Kirishima, who chose not to follow him this time. Todoroki also opted to head out alone, explaining that he couldn't use his quirk safely in a large group. Izuku and the rest of Class 1A moved forward and soon encountered students from Ketsubutsu, led by Yo Shindo, who grinned at Izuku. Shindo remarked that Izuku's quirk resembled those of Terrible Tornado and Hellish Blizzard, expressing his admiration. He and the Ketsubutsu students launched their ball at Class 1A. Izuku levitated off the ground, using his psychokinesis to stop the ball midair before sending them back, hitting many targets in the process. Ketsubutsu attempted to break through Class 1A's defenses but struggled to make any progress. In an effort to gain an advantage, Shindo used his quirk, Vibrate, causing a massive earthquake that sent Class 1A flying. However, Izuku quickly used his psychokinesis to keep everyone together, surrounding them in a green psychic aura as they landed safely. As time passed, the students of UA and Ketsubutsu engaged in a fierce competition, along with anyone else who joined in, all striving to pass the first round. Unlike in the original story, Toga, having already obtained Izuku's blood during the Kamino raid, did not infiltrate the exam disguised as Kami. The real Kami was participating in another part of the stadium. In the end, all of Class 1A passed, including Bakugu, thanks to Kaminari, who followed and assisted him in a challenging situation that could have led to his failure. The 100 examinees who passed the first round gathered in a room with a large screen displaying camera footage of the stadium. Yakumaru Mera announced that for those who passed the first test, they should turn their attention to the screen. Everyone looked at the giant display, confused by the various explosions occurring in different locations throughout the stadium. He explained that the second and final round would involve rescue exercises, where they would need to save bystanders who were trapped and in need of help. He urged them to treat this as a real situation to demonstrate their ability to carry out successful rescue operations once they received their provisional licenses. As they prepared, they noticed people appearing within the now rundown test sites. Yakumaru Mera introduced the Help Us Company, or HUC for short, explaining that these specialists had been trained as professional persons in need of rescue. Some of these individuals were applying fake blood to themselves, resembling injured victims. Kirishima observed that they were essentially actors, and Akiyama agreed. Yakumaru Mera explained that the HUC bystanders would be scattered throughout the disaster site, and they would be judged on how well they kept them safe during the mission. The point system would determine their success, and if they scored above the benchmark by the end of the exercise, they would pass. He informed them that they would start in 10 minutes, giving them time to prepare. After the countdown, everyone headed out to assist the bystanders. Izuku used his psychokinesis to levitate debris and help the trapped individuals to safety. Suddenly, an explosion occurred as pro-hero Gang Orca and his sidekicks appeared, posing as villains for the exam. Shindo rushed in to hold them back with his quirk, managing to fend off some of Gang Orca's sidekicks, but he was quickly knocked out by a sonic wave from Gang Orca. Izuku then used his psychokinesis to send Gang Orca and his sidekicks flying back, and he levitated the unconscious Shindo into the arms of another student. He instructed everyone to evacuate the civilians and called for backup if anyone was available. Soon, some of his classmates joined in to help evacuate the bystanders, with Todoroki standing by Izuku's side, ready to assist in fighting off the villains. Just in time, Inesa Yorashi from Shiketsu High arrived, hovering above them with his wind quirk. The three worked together to hold off Gang Orca and his sidekicks, though they faced challenges as Todoroki and Yorashi's quirks occasionally interfered with each other. Frustrated by their bickering, Izuku shouted for them to focus, expressing that he was doing all the work and urging them to save their arguments for after the exam. The two teens agreed, feeling ashamed of their behavior. With Izuku's leadership, they effectively held back Gang Orca and his sidekicks. Eventually, the buzzer blared, signaling everyone to stop. Yakumaru Mera announced through the PA system that all HUC members had been rescued from the disaster zone. He acknowledged that it might seem anticlimactic, but the provisional license exam had officially concluded. After tallying the scores, they would announce the results in the arena, and anyone injured should head to the infirmary. The rest of the examinees were free to change clothes and wait wherever they liked. After some time, as everyone changed out of their costumes and back into their school uniforms, all 100 examinees gathered in the arena. Yakumaru Mera stood on stage with a microphone. Yakumaru Mera expressed gratitude for everyone's hard work in the exam. Before announcing the results, he explained the evaluation process. The Heroes Public Safety Commission and HUC had implemented a twofold demerit system to determine the total scores, focusing on how few mistakes each examinee made in a crisis situation. He then gestured to the large screen behind him, indicating that the names of those who passed were listed there in alphabetical order. As the screen lit up, most of the examinees searched nervously for their names. Izuku felt a surge of joy as he spotted his name, and thanks to his efforts, both Todoroki and Yurashi managed to pass as well, albeit narrowly. Staff members circulated, handing out printouts that included a breakdown of each examinee's scores, allowing them to identify areas for improvement. Since Bakugo had not been kidnapped by the League of Villains during the training camp, he felt less responsible for All Might's retirement and was more level-headed than in the original timeline. With the exams concluded, Izuku smiled proudly as he held his provisional license. Yet, despite his happiness, a sense of unworthiness began to creep in, dimming his smile. Later that evening, he was called to meet with Toshinori and Detective Tsukachi. As he made his way to the teacher's lounge, he was surprised to find his parents and sisters present. Izuku was taken aback by their unexpected presence. Toshinori invited him to take a seat, which he did, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern. Tsukachi explained that they were gathered to discuss information from Hellish Blizzard regarding the villain known as White Hood, which was also a family matter. Izuku glanced at Fubuki, the psychic hero, who appeared nervous as she took a deep breath. Fubuki revealed that White Hood's real name was Psychos, a close friend of hers and a former UA student. Izuku was shocked, recalling what the psychic villain had said to him during the Kamino incident. He wondered why he had no memory of her, despite Fubuki's claim that Psychos had often visited their home when he was younger. Fubuki took her time to explain that Psychos had been like a third sister to him. She recounted how, during their first year at UA, Psychos had begun to act strangely, mumbling to herself and avoiding her friends and family. This behavior continued until she disappeared, prompting a search by police and heroes that lasted for months, but Psychos was never found until the events in Kamino. Tsukachi concluded that for some reason, Psychos had become White Hood and had been recruited by All for One into the League of Villains. Izuku, feeling a mix of emotions, questioned why he couldn't remember her if he had looked up to her as a sister. Fubuki revealed that after Psychos' disappearance, Izuku had fallen into a deep sadness, crying for his lost sister. To protect him, she had used her quirk to erase all memories of Psychos from his mind. The revelation stunned Izuku, Toshinori, and Tsukachi. Fubuki expressed her sorrow for what she had done, explaining how difficult it had been to manipulate his memories. As Izuku's fists clenched in response, she apologized profusely, unsure how to make amends. In an unexpected moment, Izuku tackled her with a hug, tears in his eyes. He reassured her that he couldn't bear to see her suffer, emphasizing that she was his big sister and that he understood the difficult choice she had made for his well-being. Fubuki, surprised by his reaction, questioned if he truly didn't hate her. Izuku affirmed that he could never hate her, and they both cried as they embraced. Hisashi, wanting to shift the focus back to family, caught their attention. Inko prompted Tatsumaki to speak to her brother. The eldest Midoriya sibling stood and approached Izuku, expressing her own apology. She reflected on how she had reacted when he first received his quirk, admitting that she had been scared for him. She had worried about the dangers of being a hero and regretted her words that had dismissed his dreams. Izuku listened intently as Tatsumaki acknowledged how far he had come since then. She recognized his growth, noting that despite being a late bloomer, he had quickly mastered his quirk and continued to improve at UA. She admired his strength and skill, realizing he had surpassed her own abilities at his age. Izuku reflected on his past words, regretting how he had distanced himself from his sister, Tatsumaki. As she lowered her head, a heavy silence enveloped the group until she looked back up into Izuku's eyes, her voice trembling with emotion. She asked if he could ever forgive her. Izuku stared at her for what felt like an eternity before a smile broke across his face. He assured her that he could forgive her, and as he embraced her, Tatsumaki was overcome with tears, returning the hug with equal warmth. Soon, the rest of the Midoriya family joined in, creating a circle of support that brought smiles to Toshinori and Tsukachi as they watched. Eventually, it was time for the Midoriya family to depart. Izuku bid farewell to his family before turning his attention to Toshinori. He approached him, hesitating slightly before addressing him as Mr. Yagi. Toshinori chuckled, encouraging Izuku to call him All Might without hesitation. Izuku took a deep breath, revealing his doubts about deserving his provisional license. He recounted the events at the training camp, where he had pushed himself beyond his limits to defeat Muscular, who had enhanced his quirk with a drag. Izuku expressed his guilt over being captured, believing that if he had acted differently, Toshinori would not have needed to retire. Tears streamed down his face as he voiced his anguish. Toshinori embraced Izuku, reassuring him that he had fought valiantly to protect his classmates and young Koda. He emphasized that he would never blame Izuku for his retirement, prompting the young hero to nod slowly. Toshinori encouraged Izuku to smile, and after wiping his tears, Izuku managed to give him a bright smile. Toshinori expressed his pride in Izuku as both a hero and a teacher. Just then, Tsukachi interrupted, bringing up an important matter. He informed them that Muscular was a high-ranking villain and reminded Izuku of his earlier admission about losing control and killing him. Izuku lowered his head in shame, confirming that he had buried Muscular under tons of dirt and rock. Tsukachi revealed that during their investigation, the pile had been cleared, and they found no trace of Muscular. Izuku felt a wave of unease wash over him at the thought of Muscular still being out there. Meanwhile, in a hidden laboratory, Dr. Garaki and Psychos observed a water tank containing Muscular's mangled form. Dr. Garaki expressed his disappointment over Muscular's demise, noting that he had been a useful tool but difficult to control. Psychos acknowledged that with their master imprisoned, leadership of the League had fallen to Tamura, but she believed he was not yet ready to succeed all for one. Suddenly, Dr. Garaki felt a crushing sensation in his chest as Psychos used her psychokinesis against him. Struggling to breathe, he pleaded with her, but Psychos explained that she could not allow him to hinder Tamura's growth. She assured him that she would continue his work with the Nomu, having learned everything she needed during her time with him. As Garaki reached out in desperation, Psychos bid him farewell, stating that she took no pleasure in what she was about to do. With one final breath, Dr. Garaki succumbed, and Psychos claimed the laboratory as her own. To be continued.